Okay, Claudia, you want to start and I'll read the opening statement? Hello? Anybody
You're
hear
good.
me?
You're good to go, Steve.
We hear you.
Okay. All right, very good. Okay, sorry about the confusion. There's something wrong with my computer. Okay, this is a regular meeting of the Princeton Zoning Board of Adjustment being held electronically via Zoom on September 27, 2025, or 23 at 7:30 p.m. Pursuant to Section 13 of the Open Public Meeting Act, adequate notice of the time and place of this meeting has been given by prominently posting the sunshine notice of the Princeton Zoning Board of Adjustment. Such notice has been placed on the official bulletin board of the municipal complex, and by transmitting a copy of the notice to the Princeton Packet, Town Topics, the Times, Trentonian, and by filing a copy with the Clerk of Princeton on September 22nd, 2023, and has been posted to the municipal website, www.princeton.nj.gov/meetings. Pursuant to the extension of the state of emergency by Executive Order number 292, in accordance with the Emergency Remote Public Meetings Protocol, local public bodies to conduct a public meeting without a physical attendance by the members of the public. Notice that during the extension of the state of emergency, all regular and special meetings of the Princeton Zoning Board of Adjustment will be held electronically via Zoom, was transmitted to the Princeton Packet, Town Topics, the Times, and was filed with the Clerk of Princeton on the 24th day of April, 2020. Such notices have been placed on the official bulletin board at the municipal complex and on the Princeton website, and are to be maintained throughout the year, and by transmitting a copy of same to the Princeton Packet, Town Topics, the Times, Trentonian, Comcast Media, and by filing a copy thereof with the Clerk of Princeton. Notices have also been placed on all window doors of the municipal complex. That's okay.
Great.
All right.
Roll call, Claudia, please.
Ms. Chen,
Yes.
Absent.
Ms. Coulson,
Yes. Present.
Mr. Davich,
Yes.
Mr. Floyd,
Here.
Mr. Shriver,
Here.
Mr. Tenenbaum, Mr. Stein, George,
You're muted, George.
I'm sorry, I'm here, yes.
Hello.
Ms.
Thanks.
Donna,
Yes.
Chairman Cohen.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay. The first order of business this evening will be, we have two resolutions. The first one is Z23-356, 296 South Harrison Street, block 11,002, lot 51 in the E1 zone. And again, these resolutions are in your packet. If anyone has any comments on the resolution, would like to make any changes, or would like to make a motion for approval. Anyone?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I second. Eve Colson.
Okay. Okay.
Ms. Coulson,
Yes.
Mr. Shriver,
Yes.
Mr. Stein,
Yes.
Chairman Cohen.
Yes.
Thank you.
Our second resolution is case number Z23-389, 336 Rosedale Road, block 8301, lot 4 in the R1 zone. Again, the information's in your packets.
I move to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
Second.
Ms. Coulson,
Okay.
yes,
Mr. Shriver,
Yes.
Mr. Stein,
Yes.
Chairman Cohen.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we have 3 items on the agenda this evening. The first is a carryover from the last meeting. It's case number Z22-293, 18 Prospect Avenue, block 49.01, lot 2.01 in the E2B zone. I believe we took jurisdiction at the last meeting, Karen?
That's correct,
So everything is in order.
correct.
I guess,
We're ready, we're
Okay.
ready to proceed tonight.
okay. So who's representing the applicant?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Ryan Kennedy from Stevens and Lee for the Tower Club applicant.
Okay, please begin.
Steve, do you want to hear first from
Well,
the board
yeah.
professionals?
I-
All right,
Yes, I
Let
think we
me-
should hear Derek's memo.
all righty.
And then,
Well, we
Derek's
have-
memo and then Elizabeth.
We have Derek here this evening along with Justin Lesko, the municipal planner, and Dan Weissman, the land use engineer. So Dan, there we go. I'll swear all of you in. I don't know, is Elizabeth Kim here
Julie
tonight?
Capizoli's here in Elizabeth's
That's it.
place. so
Okay,
Maybe
got
Julie
it.
wants to
So-
get sworn in now, or
Is Julie there or,
I see her.
okay. Well,
There she
there we
is.
go.
Hi,
All right,
Julie.
we'll swear everybody in now. Derek, Justin, Dan, and Julie, do you swear or affirm any testimony you give this evening will be truthful?
Yes,
I do. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Steve. What I'd like to do is, we're here tonight for a classification of a minor site plan development at 13 Prospect Avenue. That's the Tower Club of Princeton University. And what we usually do on the site plans like this is I'm going to hand it off to our planner, Justin Lesko. He's going to kind of give an overview of the application. We do have Dan Weissman here. He's available for any questions maybe after Justin's introduction. And then Julie Capizoli will present the historic preservation report from the HPC. So if it's
Okay.
okay, I'd like to give it to Justin at this point. Thanks.
Certainly.
Thank you, Derek. I'd like to share my screen. I believe I can. Good evening, members of the zoning board. My name is Justin Lesko. I'm the planning director with the municipality. So just to acquaint us with the property, I'm showing the cover sheet from the applicant's submitted material. The subject parcel is on Prospect Avenue, 2 lots in from Washington Road. Nassau would be to the north out of this box. Football stadium is to the right a little over here. The subject parcel is located in E2 educational zone of the former borough, as the chair said. The existing structure is an eating club for the university, the Tower Club, and clubhouses are permitted use in the E2 zone. And I'd like to switch to, this is aerial imagery from NJ GeoWeb from the State Department of Environmental Protection, Bureau of GIS. And it's kind of blurry, but just to give you a little more, show you what the existing structure is. The clubhouse was completed in 1917 as a brick Tudor revival building. The lot is slightly larger than a half acre. You'll note that there's a front lawn similar to the other structures on Prospect Avenue, especially the other eating clubs. And there is a back patio. But note, even though these lot lines are not obviously completely accurate, that the structure is built very close to both the lot lines, the side lot lines, excuse me. There's a driveway to the northeast corner of the site, and cars park in a stacked configuration in front of a dumpster area. And there's a bit of an elevation goes down towards the building. There's public metered parking on the south side of Prospect Avenue, and Princeton University's Tiger Transit bus stops across the street at Fisher Hall and is open to all members of the community. And NJ Transit and Muni bus routes are a little further to the north on Nassau Street. The property is also located in the Prospect Avenue Historic District, which was designated a local historic district in 2022. Now switching over to the proposed site plan from the applicant. The application calls for an addition on the west side of the building. So this is flipped from what I was just showing you, for an elevator for ADA accessibility, as well as reconfiguring and expanding the parking area in front of the building to create a total of 4 spaces, one of which would be ADA accessible. To do this, the applicant would remove a large, mature American sycamore tree, and a Japanese red maple would be relocated. And in their proposal, they have plantings under our shade tree ordinance to substitute for that. Additionally, an interior wall would be removed near the parking area, and a new retaining wall with an ornamental fence would be constructed in front of the clubhouse itself. A D variance is requested to exceed the floor area ratio allowance, and C bulk variances are also being requested. My comments are that the applicant states that the building is not currently ADA accessible, and hence the need for the elevator, which is certainly an admirable goal. They should just show how the access will be provided to all of the floors, particularly considering the unique slope of the site. And also the applicant should demonstrate why 4 parking spaces are needed and not just the ADA one, and how that need cannot be addressed elsewhere, like the on-street metered parking or garages or parking lots associated with the university. Obviously noting that the Tower Club is separate from the university, but closely aligned. And I would also like to echo what the Environmental Commission and the Shade Tree Commission wrote in their reports, that fewer spaces could be constructed to minimize impacts to the existing trees. Additionally, the Historic Preservation Officer and Historic Preservation Commission have provided recommendations since I completed my report. I'll defer to Ms. Capizzoli on that, but I would like to note that the historic appropriateness of the proposal, again, particularly the lot in the front, should be considered, especially how the cars that inevitably go in the lot might block the view of the building. I am happy to take any questions, and I will give the floor back.
Why don't we, since Justin provided some materials that are not in the review memo, why don't we call his slides Board Exhibit 1, and we'll label the review memo June 30, 2023 from Dan Weissman and Derek as Board Exhibit 2. Steve, you're muted.
Justin, can you pull back up the site plan slide?
Certainly. Here it is. And again, this comes from the applicant's submitted materials.
I just want to make sure I understand that the shaded area is the existing driveway.
That's correct.
And there are no parking spots in there now. That's, I assume, basically for a trash pickup, but some cars park in there.
Yes, it's informal at this time. I would imagine the applicant has some photos of it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Steve?
Yeah, oh, which Steve's? Me or
Yeah,
Steven
that's
Schreiber?
right. Chairman?
Yes,
Mr.
thank
Chairman.
you.
Yeah, I had a question for the planner, for Justin. In one of the reports, commission's reports, there was suggestion that the applicant explore getting working with the town to see if they could be a handicap space. I read it as on Prospect Street, right in front. Is that, in your opinion, even a chance?
I think we really need to split up the ADA accessible space and the other three, in my opinion. I'm not sure. I know the council has looked into that for individual property owners and have found, particularly if they have a driveway, they don't need that.
Right.
So I think I don't know how likely it would be, frankly.
Okay, yeah,
Well,
thanks. I remember council dealing with, I think it was on Hawthorne Street or something.
Yep, that's one I'm thinking of as well.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, we're gonna go to Ms. Capizoli next.
We can. We also,
Hello?
Dan Dobromilski also has joined us, and Dan has a memo as well regarding the landscape and existing trees. So Dan, Chairman Cohen, do you want to hear from Dan?
Well, Julie
Yes,
has
please.
popped up, so maybe
I'm
after.
sorry. I apologize. I didn't see Julie. No problem.
So would you like me to just summarize our memo?
Please.
Okay. So we really debated quite extensively about this application, and our support for the elevator was much easier than the support for the parking. And I do believe that we were convinced that this club is in a very unique situation because of the construction for the environmental and seas campus buildings. This club has been kind of cut off from the rest of the parking. And what they're saying is that it's very, very hard for their employees to show up early in the morning or leave late at night and park, 10 minutes away or whatever at the garage. And so they were talking about how important this is for them to keep their employees and how paying for parking elsewhere doesn't really solve their problem. So we were, on the one hand, sympathetic to their issues, and on the other hand, not wanting this to be a precedent for Prospect. So we kind of end up in the middle of the road saying, well, if you really have to have it, then try to minimize it as much as possible. And that's kind of where we left off.
Julie,
Yeah,
could you
you're
just
right.
confirm?
They're isolated.
Could you confirm the date of the HPC memo?
Okay, so let's see, I have it right in front of me. The memo is dated August 20th, 2023.
Okay. So board
And I can
members,
read through.
no, I'm sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, and just I'll read through our final 6 points. It's strongly recommended the applicant reach out to the municipal governing body to make a request for an existing space in front of the club for a handicap space. That was from our memo. It was pointed out that with handicap spaces, you cannot designate it for a specific building. So if someone else has a handicap, they can use that space. So you can never have a handicap space entirely designated just for that building in front of the property. Number 2, the existing London plane tree that's located on the front yard of the property should be saved. During the course of the HPC hearing, the club agreed that with some slight changes, that tree could be saved. The applicant, number 3, the applicant advised that the manufacturer of the original brick used on the construction of the club still available. And we just asked that samples would be reviewed for appropriateness and color. Number 4, they had proposed a slate roof on the top of the elevator structure. And we felt it would be better to be a standing seam roof with a zinc finish, because the Secretary of the Interior standards prefers that any new addition be differentiated from the original so as not to fake the historic nature. Number 4, or number 5, the 3 green giant arborvitae that were proposed to be planted were not considered favorable. They were considered to be camouflaging the facade of the eating club. And they asked that they should work with the municipal arborist in terms of the plantings to find something more appropriate. And finally, let's see. The product sheet for the wrought iron fencing should be provided. And the proposed driveway will result in 3 different surface materials. It's recommended that the porous pavement material match in color with the existing asphalt. And I think that's the extent of our comments.
Thank you. Thank you.
Then we'll make that exhibit board 3. Thank you.
Who's next, Karen?
We have
Could
Dan
I-
Dursky stand here tonight. Dan.
Chairman,
I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Chairman,
Yes, yes,
if
Michael.
I can make a couple comments regarding HPC.
Sure.
Because I saw the list of recommendations that she just went over, and it says what it says. Earlier, though, in the report we got from HPC, I think there was a little bit stronger language. Maybe it didn't make it into the recommendations in the end, but I'm looking at the bottom of page 3, where it says, referring to the parking, it proposes a significant intrusion into the front lawn, which is a ubiquitous character defining feature of Prospect Avenue Historic District. Commissioner member noted that no other eating clubs have parking in their front lawns. HPC recommended that further study be investigated to modify or eliminate the incursion of all 4 spaces, or alternatively, at least 3 of the 3 non-ADA compliant spaces be presented after Tower Club could meet the ADA compliant consultant for alternative solutions. And negotiating with the university for some type of parking arrangement to avoid such a drastic impact on the property is worth pursuing. That is in the body of the report.
Yeah, that's correct, Michael. We really went back and forth on what possible alternatives there were, but we never got any affirmation from the club that anything else was possible. So maybe Mr. Kennedy can go into any research they've done since then or discussions with the university, but our sense at the time was that they were not able to provide any alternatives.
Okay, I was just pointing out what the report says and what some positions and viewpoints were that, you know,
No,
I
it's
actually-
good because,
I actually did a little research today, if this is a good time to throw that in that I
sure,
walked around the area. I don't know what the name of the eating club is that's fronts on Washington Road. But I walked in there and talked to, I looked in the back. I took some pictures. I'm surprised nobody stopped me, but, and I saw that there was a parking lot, behind, Tower and also, the next club, which is called the Cannon Club. My research, which was not necessarily validated by knowing for sure that it's factual, was that a couple of students told me that the parking lot belonged to the Cannon Club and that they sometimes made arrangements to rent spaces there. And I did see a break in the fence behind. Now, I don't know whether, I didn't do enough research to see exactly how easy it would be to get from the back of Tower Club to that parking lot, but it didn't look impossible. So I'm just
looked
throwing
like-
that in since I did
yeah,
some
it
research.
looks like
And I
there's a
wonder-
drive along that property line.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, we at HBC, we had quite a bit of testimony on this, and I'll just proffer that we will have lots to say about the restrictions and the, you know, difficulty in finding other places to park, and we wish it were as simple as it may appear sometimes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so let's move to the next report. Is that Karen? Would that be Dan?
I believe so, yes.
Good evening.
Dan, we'll just swear you
Evening.
in. Do you swear or affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
I do.
And
Dan
why don't we,
Danielski, landscape architect and tree expert for the municipality.
all right, I understand your memo is dated August 2nd, 2023. So we'll make that board exhibit. I think we're up to B4. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you. So I think obviously everything we're discussing is at the heart of what is in my report. It's really about the tree mostly. The tree is a 42-inch diameter sycamore, or most likely it's a London plane tree, which is a cross between two different types of sycamores. The difficulty from what I see, and the applicant confirmed this, is they really need, in order to have a working accessible parking stall, the location they proposed it is where they need to put it in order to make it work with the grades, because the driveway slopes downward to the lower floors of the building. And so they need to have it up at street level, so to speak. And in order to make that work, they have to build a low retaining wall around the entire parking area, which then creates a 3-foot excavation within 5 feet of the tree. And you can't save that tree if you're doing that. So that's the heart of the issue, and any alternatives that would allow for better separation between the disturbance, particularly excavation, and the tree would be helpful. But my guess is you would need to achieve at least about 10 or 15 foot separation in order to even consider the possibility of actually saving the tree, and optimally not doing a wall if that's possible. If it's just pavement, that's a little bit easier to deal with than excavating a 3-foot deep wall. And the issue will be the buttressing roots of the tree. The tree is going to have buttressing roots that are the roots that are going to stabilize that tree so it doesn't fall over within that distance of the tree. And if you eliminate those roots, the tree could fall over and become very dangerous. So that's the heart of number one. Was this is what the problem is. These are what I see their constraints are, and are there alternatives to dealing with that? So I think at some point, if the applicant can make that presentation. The other comments were mainly just explaining what's going on with the tree relocation and the idea of changing some of the arborvitaes to a different plant, which has been covered by both your planner and the HPC report. My final comment was just that the brick wall will, from a landscape architecture point of view, the brick wall will buffer views of the parking so that there's no need for landscape to achieve that. That's not saying anything about the impact of the parking on the building and the historic nature of the building. So that's the crux of the problem. And I look forward to, if there are any alternatives the applicant has come up with to save the tree, I'd like to see them. And I can offer additional comments based upon that at that point.
Thank you. Okay, Karen, do we have any other experts from the
Oh, we
town
have
side?
Dan Weissman, land use engineer, is here tonight. Dan, did you want to add anything right now?
I can just run through, first off, thank you, and good evening, everybody. I could just run through some of the comments we had on the report that had to relate to the engineering aspect review of things. I'll try to be brief. But the site does require a design waiver from a parking lot aisle dimension. Municipal code requires 24 feet. They are proposing 22. As it relates to stormwater drainage, this project is considered a minor development per the Princeton Stormwater Control Ordinance. What that means is they're supposed to manage 2 gallons per square foot of new impervious and retain 0.78 gallons of impervious. Throwing numbers out there, but basically what that means is they're supposed to retain the water quality storm on site. They've requested a waiver from that requirement. Staff does not support the request for that waiver. I think there are modifications that can be made to their proposed stormwater management plan to achieve that requirement and negate the need for a waiver. So I'd be curious to see if there's anything presented tonight that can show that change. Other than that, we've already touched on the additional parking spaces, plenty so far. We would request that parking, if this would be approved, parking within the 22-foot wide drive aisle be prohibited. What would be an advantage to having these parking spaces in that drive aisle is that vehicles, if they currently park in that driveway, can either pull straight in and then back straight out over a very busy sidewalk. Having this drive aisle would allow vehicles to turn around and enter the site in a forward-facing movement and also exit the site in a forward-facing movement. So there would be an improved circulation element to the project from that standpoint. There is a requirement for a one space to be make ready as it relates to electric vehicle charging. And that really summarizes the majority of our big comments on this one. And again, available if there's any questions.
I just have one minor question relative. I agree with what you suggested in that. The only other question is regarding the electric vehicles. Is the presence of an electrical vehicle charging station a barrier to somebody who's not in an electric car to use it?
It would be up to, there's no current restrictions as to who can use an electric vehicle space. It would be up to the owner of the electric vehicle charger to.
Okay, I mean, that was based on what Mr. Kennedy said about the operation of the club, that would one electric vehicle charging station, if none of the employees had an electric car, would basically take 25% of those spaces, but 25% of the total away. So just a comment. All right, that was it. Do you have anything else right now? Hello?
No, I don't have anything else. Derek, I don't know if you had anything else in our memo you wanted to run through.
No, I mean, they just, they have the FAR variance, it increases from 0.88 to 0.89. 0.6 is what the maximum permissible is. There's a building coverage requirement that 30% is the maximum, and the coverage increases from 30.43 to 30.68%. There's a 25-foot setback for front yard parking. which they violate, excuse me, for the building, which is they're removing a shed from the western property line. The principal structure is expanded and that reduces the existing side yard from 10.5 feet to 4.6 feet. The proposed portion of the building constituting the elevator is approximately 31.3 feet in height. So the setback is 25 feet required, and no building shall be erected closer to the line than the height of that portion of the building. So that's the variance there. And then the pavement on the side where the elevator is goes right to the property line. It's supposed to be 4 feet back from the property line, and then the parking spaces are located within the front yard 25-foot setback. So those are the variances, and Dan mentioned the parking lot design waiver. So that's pretty much the engineering and zoning report. I think that caps it.
Thank you.
Donna.
Just one question.
Karen, any others? Oh,
The,
yes, Donna.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I just had a question.
Sure.
The present driveway at the Tower Club, I think the is now being used to park vehicles kind of in a haphazard way, I guess, as needed. I gather the town has no problem with that, though, the way it is right now.
I mean, it's a pre-existing condition. The few times I've been there, there weren't cars parked in there. It's also where their trash and recycling are accessed. So as Dan did mention, this would increase the movability and circulation of the existing driveway. So something that the board needs to balance.
Right, but they can, if
I mean,
if they didn't ask for this new parking area, they could continue doing, what they're doing in that existing driveway?
Yes, yep.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Donna.
If I could, I had a question on something else, but on that point, I never wanted to go into it. I mean, the way, at least the parking today, as I saw it, there were a lot of cars there. I didn't think they were all regarding zoning legally parked there, but
no, it's not.
60% of the town at various times, property owners park in the front yard.
Right.
So to Donna's question, they're probably not all legal.
They're not
is
legal.
what I think.
That's a trash and recycling area, and it's supposed to be open for that. People park in driveways, but I would say that the main function of the site now is to be able to get in and out with deliveries and the trash and the recycling. I think that's part of the reason they're here.
I had a question on the make ready electric parking space. I was just wondering what triggers that. Is it the number of spaces? And if so, what is that number?
It is based off of a state requirement for electric vehicle charging for any site plan approval that involves a parking lot. So I believe the state is 1 space is required for up to 25 space parking lot. It bumps to 2 spaces if you're up to 50 space parking lot, and then elevates from there. So since this does include a parking lot per se, it would trigger that state requirement.
And I guess the follow-up question, if there were less spaces, would it still be a lot? I'm just trying to understand what triggers it.
Well, I'm not sure. Dan, the way I read it is not so much a lot. It's just based on the number of parking spaces that you've got on the property. So, whether you want to call it
What's the lowest number that makes it a lot?
Well, I think with the statute, they don't call it a lot. They call it off-street parking spaces. So they say, and I may not be, I think I'm looking at the most recent version. Maybe I'm not, but I think it's one make-ready parking space for every few or fewer off-street parking spaces. So, I think the statute's trying without calling it a lot, it's simply saying if you have so many off-street parking spaces, then here is the standard that municipalities need to follow. I'm not answering it, Michael, or
Well, I don't know what so many is.
Yeah, there is
That's what
no,
I'm
so
trying to
many
get at.
is not a real, you can't quantify so many, you're right.
You
It
know,
would seem
I'll
to me,
accept the
Michael-
word. I accept you read what it says,
right.
but what does it mean?
What does it mean?
That's all
Yeah,
I'm
the other
trying to
thing-
get to.
Michael, I don't think there's a definition of parking lot, but to me, it would be any parking area with individual parking spaces with common circulation. To me, that would constitute a lot.
Okay.
If it's one car, yeah. I mean, but it's not defined anywhere.
Yeah, I follow you. And if individual parking spaces, that could be two or more spaces, cannot be one. So I can, that makes sense to me. Yeah, so that reading, if it's two spaces, then it should be also made ready. That's just what I was trying to understand. You
Sure.
agree, Mr. Kennedy?
So we'll make it easy though, because we're excited to put in the to have the make ready spot regardless. I think
Great.
I'm with your board attorney's interpretation. There's the residential and non-residential, and it's almost anything that's not covered above is there's a minimum, and you trigger that minimum of one pretty quickly, if not immediately. But in any event, it's a good thing, and we're excited to put it in, frankly, here.
Great. Thank you.
Good. Okay, if there are no more experts on the town's part, is that correct, Karen?
There is, I'm not sure,
Derek?
I don't know what the screen is with the phone number on it.
That's
Do you see?
Steve's.
Oh, it's Steve's, got
Probably
it.
mine, I called in.
Okay, no problem. All right, no, there isn't any, no other professionals right now.
Okay, Derek, I think we'll move on now and allow Mr. Kennedy to start.
Great.
Okay,
I'm sorry, one more question. Is there anybody from the Environmental Commission who also submitted a report? Or is it gonna be addressed?
I think Justin addressed their comments. They wanted to save the tree slated for removal. They wanted a variety of trees where the three arborvitaes had been indicated to avoid monoculture. And the landscaping should be done with a non-invasive native plant, preferably keystone native plants. And that the drainage be reviewed around the north exterior of the elevator addition to ensure that there will be no water buildup, which could infiltrate the enclosure and create mold or mildew or pest intrusions.
Okay. You know,
For
I definitely don't want to come off as the bad guy, but executive comments in the report. The Princeton Environmental Commission
does not endorse the proposed 4 parking spaces, approving the 4 parking spaces. The precedent should not be set to accommodate parking in the front yard. However, in the interest of creating a universally accessible building, the PEC recommends that the applicant take advantage of the existing driveway to accommodate 1 ADA space in order to minimize additional impervious coverage. Any variance relief request attended to providing a single ADA stall should be considered to address safety, as proposed in the design. Installing 4 spaces necessitates removal of matured shade trees. Loading space for only 1 ADA stall should allow the applicant to save the tree, which PEC strongly suggests doing. Additionally, to accommodate other parking needs, there are parking lots on the adjacent eating clubs where parking spaces could be perhaps rented. The north garage is just down Prospect Avenue and could potentially be used for parking, and the east garage is another good option for parking. Trigger Transit could take the riders from the garages to near the intersection of Washington and Prospect. In a project where the applicant is requesting a variance to avoid having to address stormwater recharge on the site due to derated, highly impermeable soil, removing a mature sycamore tree that absorbs gallons of stormwater seems counterproductive. Should the applicant still need to meet the stormwater management regulations, even after reducing impervious coverage by eliminating 3 of the desired parking stalls, the PEC recommends that the applicant seek an alternative stormwater management by planting multiple large caliper trees and water tolerant native vegetation. The PET commends the applicant for considering reuse of plants if they are not invasive, native, and adequate for stormwater management in this case. Secondarily, stormwater management should be considered on a nearby property according to runoff flow. And then we already went over the other items.
Yeah.
Well, since
Thank
we are now making reference to their report, we'll make that board exhibit 5, and that's the PEC report, December 14, 2022.
Thank you.
Thanks for bringing that to our attention, Michael.
Yeah, they come right out and say they don't endorse it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, Mr. Kennedy, would you like to start?
I would. Thank you to Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and all your professionals, and I'll extend that to all of the other volunteers that worked on the advisory reports that we just heard through. We have a bunch of folks here as attendees that I'd like to ask be moved over. Patrick Young, who's represented from the Tower Club. We've got 2 architects, Carl Galetta and John Hassan. We have a arborist, Tim Bruchet, Bruchez, and then our engineer, Sam Wali, to bring over for tonight's presentation.
If
while
they
they're
can
coming-
raise their hand, as too many people, if they can raise their hand.
All right. Okay, I believe I'm now seeing all of our folks on camera now. Ms. Casey, if you'd like us to swear everyone in to start, just so we can get that behind us.
Sure, let me just see. So we have Mr. Young, Mr. Boucher, Mr. Wally, Mr. Hassan, and Mr. Gatila. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Gentlemen, if you would all raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
Yeah,
I do.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you all. So this might be a record for my applications. We've heard a lot about it already before we've started, but lots of helpful information, and we want to thank HPC. I know they wrote this a while ago. We actually got it last week, but ultimately it largely reflects a very good conversation about a difficult approach or difficult way of dealing with accessibility at a historic building in a new historic district with some very unique needs. There are 2 core components of this project here tonight. One is the elevator tower. As the HPC chair said, they had a lot less difficulty in coming to a recommendation for approval on that. They made some specific comments about the design that we're happy to accommodate, but at the end of the day, you'll see it's not visible from the street or neighboring properties. It is a de minimis in size, and you'll hear about why it's just needed. There's really no other way to address accessibility for this historic building and site, and you'll hear about that. I hope you, I do need 5 votes on that. It is technically, well, about 60 square feet, a floor area variance for a building that was already over, and I'm sure at a time that well predated the E requirements when this was imposed as zoning. But we'll go through the need for that, and I'm perhaps thinking and hoping though that the board will have a similar lack of trouble with wrapping your heads around the elevator for accessibility than the parking. I'll also jump out and say that kind of a Dr. Seuss style. This is not the Onceler's application. We too want to save this tree, and our discussion with HPC kind of surrounded that. And it's a balancing of the need for accessibility, an accessible parking space, and you'll hear from Mr. Young the unique needs of this particular eating club for access for employees, and a series of things are just not available anymore elsewhere. And interestingly, there was a lot of discussion at HPC about I'll say the unique relationship between the university and these eating clubs. And it's unique in that it is quite necessarily separate for liability purposes. And there's almost an impossibility of commingling employees and access that requires, unfortunately, some of the most modest employees, in our Princeton community, frankly, to either have access to these parking spaces and carpool, or not have a lot of really fair or reasonable options that the club is really desperate to accommodate with not many options. You'll also hear some thoughts essentially following the recommendations that we got from the Environmental Commission, that we got from HPC and from your consultants to pull back on that. And we think we have a way that can, at least we're hoping with our arborist, that if we pull back enough and change the design that does not require digging into that grade, would allow us to have some of what we're asking for to save that tree and still be, essentially completely obscured from the street. And even as a result, with our rethinking, have a better access path for that accessible space. Because of the current grade, you'll see it as it's pitched down towards the basement floor, which one is not an appropriate entrance for someone with accessibility needs to kind of crawl through the basement or the kitchen next to the dumpster. So one of the reasons why it had been pulled closer to the street is the slope. And the original proposed path actually would have brought them back onto the sidewalk through the front door. With our slight revised thinking, we might be able to do better than that, and both pull away from the tree and change the grading a bit, so we're not cutting into what would be the root system for this. I believe we've been saying sycamore. I'll let our tree person confirm for me. I go back and forth, or not quite sure the type of tree. To be honest with you, it's been described a couple different ways. But short answer is, we want to and are committed to the design that will save this tree. And it's important to the club and the street and this applicant, and we're essentially in agreement on that. What I'd like to do is, before I bring up Mr. Young to introduce himself and start talking about this property and the unique needs here of the Tower Club, we have one exhibit, I guess marked A1. I'd like to share my screen if that's okay, and mark that so we can start going through some of the visuals, which I think should help the board in its understanding of what we're saying here. So if that's all right to mark it as A1, I will share my screen.
Mr. Kennedy, do you know how many slides you have?
There are 16. I'm not sure we'll actually get to all of them, but as many as 16.
Okay.
And with that, Patrick, if you could unmute yourself and introduce yourself to the board with what your role is at the club.
Hi, my name is Patrick Yoon. I graduated Princeton in 1992. I was a member of Tower Club. I served as chairman from 93 till 96 of the graduate board. I've been on the board for the last 30 years. And currently, I'm retired, so I go to the club about 4 or 5 times a week for a couple hours, and I help manage the club in my spare time. And this project arose because we had a student who was in a wheelchair. We have in the past, but it became very obvious that it was such an old building and it wasn't accessible. And it really wasn't proper to ask her to go down to the basement level through the kitchen just to eat. And so we thought about different ways we could make the club more accessible. And we said, okay, we'll put a parking space in and do the elevator. I think the elevator is self-explanatory, but I think the parking is a little bit different. What I think the board has to understand is of all the clubs on Prospect Avenue, we are the only club that's accessible through the front. So while some have a couple have driveways, they have their parking, all their parking and deliveries are in the back. And we're the only club that isn't. And somebody noted they looked and they saw all the clubs have different spaces and parking lots. Well, the university a couple years ago decided to build that monstrosity back there. And in the process, they've eaten up many parking lots that were back there. So the club, we did rent 3 parking spaces from the Cannon Club, which they will no longer rent to us because they lost parking too. So we have about 12 employees who make between $12 and $15 an hour. They have nowhere to park. And saying to park on the street, well, you have to, I think the parking is only 2 to 3 hours. They would have to go out there 4 times a day and pay. And if you're making $12 to $15 an hour, paying for parking, even in the garage, is not tenable. I don't know. I don't know. I think the problem is people say, oh, they can park in here. It's expensive, especially for most people, probably expensive. Consider doing it 8 hours a day. And especially if you're making $12 an hour. I mean, it's really not tenable for these people to do that. So they do park in the driveway. And we lost 3 spots at the Cannon Club, which they informed us they will no longer be renting to us. Their club will rent their spots because parking at such a premium. So in the university and the clubs have a very interesting relationship, and part of it's separate. They do not want to take on any liability. Their lawyers will not allow us to park in the university lots. Even during COVID, this became a real issue, and we've tried many times. We have a contract with the university, a shared services agreement, where we get all our IT services. We get a lot of services through the university, but it's always separate, and our employees cannot mix with their employees and they say it's for liability reasons. In fact, if we park in that spot behind Cannon Club, not their personal parking spot right behind the club, but there's a parking lot, we get towed, and they'll tow anybody away. So parking is not getting parking in the university and parking from the other clubs, especially now that there's been a lot of parking destruction, is impossible. So, and since we are the only club on the street on Prospect Avenue who accesses everything through the front, our deliveries, our garbage, while it helps during the construction, because we don't have any problems because all the other clubs are having issues because of all the construction. But the downside is that we don't have access through the back. And so being afraid that it sets a precedent really is not an issue. It's a moot point because no other club does what we do. In fact, you can drive down, there's nobody parks in their driveway. Everybody has a lot. Everybody has some parking spaces. We don't. I think in like the 30s we had that we had part of the terrace clubs parking, but we sold it to them in the 30s or 40s. So we don't have access to that anymore.
Patrick, I'm going to take this through a couple more slides. We can orient the board a bit. This is the zoning map showing, where in the former borough E2 zone that we are. I think this might be helpful, Patrick. This is a overhead map similar to the one that Mr. Lesko had showed earlier. This is the club in blue, but I think maybe this would be a good one to just kind of repeat or give a little bit more testimony about the uniqueness of this site. And at one point, perhaps earlier in the evening, it was referred to, in terms of precedent. And of course, each of these applications has to stand on their own regardless. But what's unique about this site is do I have it right that you're the only one that does not have some other access, whether it's a rear parking lot, whether it's a driveway that reaches the rear? You're the only one that's essentially landlocked with only a front driveway. Is that correct?
Yes. If you look at the pictures, you can see all the spaces where they go, and the road in the back, kind of the really small road, they have access. Every single property has that except for us. We're the
Can I
only
ask a
one.
question? Does the club have access, again, is it Cannon that's on Washington Road?
To the right? No, that's Terrace on Washington Road.
What's the club on Washington behind
That
you?
one is Terrace. That one.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
Terrace Club. We don't have access. There's a grade there. We don't have access to the parking lot. We used to own it, but we sold it to them, I think, in the 30s or the 40s.
Okay, so there's no ability, obviously you can't park on their property, but can you drive
No.
through their property to get
No,
access to your
there's an
backyard?
elevation. There's an elevation difference between there. It's pretty steep. It goes down. There's no access there. In fact, I can't even walk. I can't even get to even though we're the closest to Terrace. I can't even get. I have to go out to the street to Prospect Avenue, go down Washington Road, and I cannot. Now we have during big parties we have a problem with people climbing over the fence, but I'm not going to do it at my age. There's no gate. There's no gate there at all.
Okay. No, you've answered it. I was just wondering if you had the ability to get an easement through their property to get into yours, but the grade would prohibit that.
Yeah, no, there is no access. There's no way we can do it.
Okay.
And if you look
Patrick,
at this picture, every other club does, except for ours.
And Patrick, if you could, if the grade was correct, and the club would grant you something, does that put you anywhere near from a either an entrance accessibility or a delivery perspective?
No.
Where you would
No,
need to be?
there's no way. Even if Terrace Club would grant us an easement, we'd have to rip. We'd have to. No, there's no way.
Okay.
Okay. Also,
Thank you.
want to talk a little bit, Patrick, about before we get to our engineer. Just in summary, you testified a lot about the lack of rear access for deliveries that the other clubs have. The loss of the parking that you had been renting at adjacent clubs, unfortunately, resulting from university construction. The narrowness of this lot, which means that there's just no way around the building to get to the back, even if there were spaces there. And the essentially the location of that kitchen for deliveries and access being oriented away from where these other spaces are, even if there were to be something available. Could you talk a little bit though about the efforts you've made? Again, at HPC, there's a lot of discussion about access to the rear, and if there's any other things you could do to make the rear essentially more accessible. The elevator project makes the floors accessible. Would you talk a little bit about what parts of the building are being joined by these elevators? And perhaps I'll put up a site map here that shows the front that you could, to this is slide 6, that might explain how one gets into the building and what the elevator connects students and staff to.
Sure. At the bottom of the driveway, there's an entrance where we take in deliveries. That's the entrance to the kitchen, right there. Yeah, that is where the people with wheelchair have to go through. It's ramped. There's workers there, and there's storage there, and you actually have to go through past fryers, past ovens to access the eating area. So that we found that unacceptable to our students who have to be in wheelchairs. So the front door is really the only area where somebody can go in with a wheelchair. Now, at the top of that picture, if you go to the backyard, there's fencing around the entire, there's a grade and there's steps. So what we did is we built a ramp so that the people in wheelchairs can access the backyard, but only the backyard. The entrance in the back is to the dining room is there's a stairwell that goes down about 2-3 feet. And so to get an ADA ramp, we'd have to go out, like, I think we worked it to be about 32 feet. So that really wasn't an answer. Then if you go, the other entrance from the back is you have to go up about 30 stairs to get to the main floor back, where there's French doors into the main living room. So that wasn't an option. If you go around to the side where we're putting the elevator in, there is a door, but again, that is below grade, about 3 feet. And so there is no access for wheelchairs. And we've looked into that. So we decided the only way to get true access for a handicapped person would be put an elevator in, and that would give access to 3 floors: the basement level, where the dining room and the kitchen is, so they can eat; the main floor, where most of the social events and the people study there; and the second floor, which is the library, and the carol room and the computer room, which is the main area that people study. That's what we concluded. The reason why it's on that side of the building is because if you put it on the other side, the person would we'd have to destroy most of our kitchen, and they would still have to go. It's just not feasible.
Thank you, Patrick. So before we get to any of our other witnesses, and certainly Mr. Unum's not going anywhere, but if there's any operational questions, particularly about the unfortunate reality of parking, certainly like to yield at this point, if there are any, why Patrick is here.
Board members, do you have any questions relating to access?
Yeah,
Okay.
I have a question regarding the property that was sold by Tower. Was it to Terrace, you said?
Terrace. Now, I wasn't alive then, but I heard the story was that used to be our property.
Do you know?
Yeah, right there. That part.
Yeah. Do you know, once it was sold to Terrace, has Tower had any access to that to park? Any arrangement with Terrace?
Oh, no, we've never had access to it.
Okay. And
They're really, so if you see our backyard, the grade from where we are to
yes,
that building, there's just no, there's
no,
staircase there.
I'm sorry. I'm not really inferring access that way. Because quite frankly, if you could park there, someone could walk out to, and around the corner. I'm not talking about the handicap. I'm talking about, fully able-bodied people that aren't handicapped. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about jumping a fence or climbing up
They'll
an
never
incline.
go. Yeah.
Patrick, perhaps
Even if they would never give us parking. Parking, you have to understand, parking is such a premium for the clubs. And Cannon Club is the only with extra parking. And because there were several lots back there in this picture. You see all those lots.
Yes,
Some of those were all gone.
I understand. I'm really surprised that Tower sold it and left themselves with no parking, but that was a long time ago.
Perhaps at a time before.
Yeah.
Really parked it anyway.
Yeah, from the time that both predated zoning and perhaps predated the use of automobiles regularly at the time. Before we leave that question though, Patrick, maybe you could just because I think what Mr. Floyd is getting at it, and maybe you could spend a little bit, the types of people that we're looking to have park here, what their day is like, what time they get there, and why it's perhaps a difficult suggestion then for the type of hours that they might be there, and the numbers, with carpooling, for example, why a farther distance and how far it really would be before they could find something. And then again, you mentioned the street parking. I know you talked about paying for it, but there's a limit as well. So it wouldn't just be paying for it, it'd be moving their car after a certain period before it got towed.
You'd have to go out there. I think it's a 2 to 3 hour parking limit. So you'd have to go move your car. And during the day, that entire street is filled up. So our earliest employees come in at 5 a.m. to start prepping and to do breakfast. And they're there for 10 to 12 hour shifts. And they come in 3 to 4 days a week. And everybody's shift is between 8 and 12 hours. And to take time out to move your car is just not possible. Right now, most of our employees live in Trenton, so they all carpool, because even parking in our stacked up in our driveway, there's just not enough parking. Like I said, this year we lost three spots at Cannon.
Mr. Chair, can I jump in real quick?
Certainly.
So that street is actually, it's not 3 hour parking. It's
unlimited.
There's
It's
no
unlimited. Well,
Yeah.
regardless, if you're making $12 an hour, you're really going to tell somebody who makes $12 an hour to pay for 8 hours of parking?
No, I would perhaps tell an employer to do that.
So if we run at a slight deficit to break even every year, we do not get funds from the university. We run fully on membership dues. If we had to pay that, we'd have to cut probably 4 to 5 jobs to afford it. So I can let 4 to 5 people go.
Understood. Just let me finish then on the parking, just so everyone's on the same page. You're allowed to park for 1 hour from 2 to 6, otherwise it's prohibited. You have to pay $1 an hour from 9 to 8 currently on most days, 9 to 9 Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday it's only 1 to 8. And like I said, it's not it's all day.
if I could ask a follow-up, Patrick, in your experience, is there parking available on the street?
Different times of the day, nearer
5 o'clock, yeah.
5 o'clock, there's parking. But during the morning and early afternoon, not really. There's
And
sometimes I come, I just can't park anywhere.
I'm not sure the lots that belong to, the lots that are nearby that would be available. Is there a charge for parking there, and how close are they?
Those lots that you see in the picture, none of those are available to anybody. Either they're university lots, like the one next door to us, that's the university lot. You see that big lot right there? Yeah, right there. That's university lot. If you go there, you'll be towed.
No, but I thought there were some lots somewhere nearby that were available. Is that not true? So the
No.
only thing that's available is on-street parking?
Yes, or what they're talking about in the reports is in town on Nassau Street, or in the back, like off not Witherspoon. If you go back there on Palmer Square, I think there's some parking lot,
The
parking
municipal
buildings,
lots.
municipal lots they're talking about.
There are
But
two
there are
garages
no
there.
the garage. That's what they're talking about.
Mr. Chair, could I jump in again?
Sure.
The one on William Street, the university-owned lot, is free to anyone on nights and weekends. Many of the other ones in the area, I'm not sure. I don't think the garage further down Prospect is available at any time. But that one is available nights and weekends.
There's also a little bit of municipal parking off of Witherspoon behind the shops on Nassau Street. Not a lot, but some parking, but that's generally pretty full. Okay.
I did hear,
let's keep-
just one more thought. Well, probably not, but I did, Patrick, I'm sorry, I can't quite read your last name. I don't mean to call you by your first name since I hardly know you, but I heard you say, I mean, sort of the mystery of the unfinished sentence. You said we'd have to rip, and then you said, no, it just wouldn't, we just couldn't do anything. And I think that was in relation to the back of whether you could connect in some way. I'm not quite sure where that was.
Oh,
but
yeah,
it sounded like there might have been a solution. I didn't hear what it was.
Oh, no. I was speaking, the gentleman spoke about having access to the parking lot behind Terrace Club, that one right there.
Yes.
And I said, no, we'd have to rip out all the landscaping, we'd have to grade it, and then we'd have to convince Terrace Club to give up the parking to us.
And
It's
would
really,
I clarify,
it's not, yeah,
and
there's
would
not
I
an
clar-
option.
what I clarified is walking to the corner and walking down Washington is not a far walk if you could get
Right.
parking spaces there.
Right.
So it's access and the lack of spaces. So we have both problems here, but it's probably the lack of the availability of the spaces more so than the access, which probably could be figured out.
Thank you.
Questions,
Right,
Patrick? How many employees do you have in the house?
We have, well, it depends on the time of year, but currently we have 13 employees.
And how many are working at any one time?
So in the morning, we only have 3. And close to the lunch, we have about 12. Dinner, we have about 10. So it varies during the day, but more in the early part of the day.
Thank you.
right.
I have a question. So I think if I'm reading your application properly, you're concerned about the 3 employees in the morning that get there at 5 a.m.
Yeah, so I know our sous chef gets there at 5. I think the other two come in around 6, maybe.
Okay, so if they come in at that time, and am I hearing Mr. Lesko correctly that it's $1 an hour to park? So they're talking each of them $10 to $12 a day to park on the street.
Not
that make sense?
necessarily, because it would be free from 5 to 9. So it'd be, a little less than that, or depending on when the shifts are, there might be, $1 an hour at most.
Okay,
So
All
it's
right.
about 8%. That's 8% of their salary.
okay, so it's about, we can even say around $10 a day to park it at the outward end. Okay, thanks.
But if they're carpooling, it wouldn't be the same for all of them.
Yeah, but that's-
Right.
Yeah, so
that's a big-
it depends. It depends on, I'm not really sure how they figure out who goes with who.
Okay, but there's one car generally, or 3 or 2, or,
So like the busiest part, we can have up to 6 cars.
okay, and where do they park?
No, actually, I'm sorry. The busiest part will be 9 because we had 3 spots at the Cannon Club. We'll have 6 in the driveway.
Okay, so the people who weren't parking at the Cannon Club are now parking in the driveway, and now you've got the other 3 that need to park in the driveway also.
Yeah, so sometimes there's more.
Okay.
So sometimes there's more. I know they carpool, but I'm not sure how perfectly it depends on their schedules. But like today, when I came, I parked, there were 6 cars in the driveway today at lunchtime.
Okay, and you were one of them.
Yeah.
Okay, so the 3 employers you're talking about, do they park now in the driveway?
I'm not there at 5 of them. I don't, I know Eric comes in, he does park in the driveway. The other 2 that come in like an hour later, I'm not sure. Cause
Okay.
I know like most of them live in Trenton, downtown Trenton. I
Mhm.
think 1 or 2 live in town, so I guess that person could walk. But I don't really follow I just know that there's a lot of cars. I can't match up the cars to the person.
And are you saying that there's going to be more cars now because you've lost 3 spots at Cannon, or you've already got 3 less spots? Because
We are gonna, so Canon notified us that they're going to end our agreement. I think it ends on December 31st. So we're gonna have 3 more cars on December 31st. So I assume that those guys are gonna carpool or work out something.
Okay,
They'll
and
work
the-
out something with my manager to change their schedules.
And the 3 folks who parked at Cannon, those are the people that you're looking to have now relocate to park in front of, in a parking area that you're asking for?
Yeah, look, what we propose, we figure it alleviates somewhat so are there going to be more than 4? Are they some people going to park in the driveway in front of the garbage? Probably, but so currently, to give you an example, 3 days a week we run a drill. When waste management comes, they call us. Everybody piles out, moves their cars, so the waste management get down there. So it's kind of like a ballet, right? So we're just trying to increase our parking to at least keep up with the fact that we lost 3 spots.
So you're trying,
and include a handicap for currently this year, we do not have a student in a wheelchair. The girl graduated last year, but that doesn't mean that we won't pick another one up in February.
okay.
Can I make a suggestion? The parking is going to be a big discussion. throughout this hearing. Just so we can get all the experts out and all the information presented, why don't we hold our questions regarding the parking right now until all the presentations are done and we actually start discussing this in detail? I mean, it's obviously, we know parking is critical, and I think it'd be good if we can get all the applicants' experts out to explain the overall application.
Good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Next, and we're going to kill two birds with one stone here. I'll ask our architects, plural, to unmute themselves. The firm that handled this, the primary designer, is here, but is not the one who sealed the plans. We also brought one of his partners, the New Jersey Architects, to make sure we had someone licensed as well. And I don't mean to have too much testimony, but I want to make sure we had someone who was both licensed and involved with the project. So Carl and John, if you could unmute yourselves, and I'll maybe ask John to start and give your credentials and involvement with the project, and then we'll go to Carl.
Yes, Ryan, this is John Hassan with 3GHC Architects, licensed in both Vermont and Maine since 2004, and been a partner with 3GHC Architects since 2003. So that is my credentials. Yeah, sorry.
And you were involved in this project in assisting with the design and solving some of the problems with the architecture here?
That's correct. That's correct.
All right. And
Mr. Hassan, just one quick question, but did you sign these plans?
No, my partner
You
Carl
not,
Catilla
because-
did. Yes.
I'm sorry. Okay, thank you.
and now Carl, same question for you.
Sure. Carl Gatilla, President, 3GHC Architects, licensed in New Jersey and 9 other states. So I'm working with John. John's actually done most of the design work on this project, but I'm overseeing it. And I'm certainly here to answer any technical questions that may arise that I can help with.
Thank you.
Well, we'll accept the two gentlemen as one is an expert in architecture and the other as involved in the project.
Much appreciated. And we'll be quite quick here. I'm going to share our slideshow again, and we'll talk about the architecture of the stair tower. Gentlemen, I believe this slide here shows a photo of the front of the building and the front elevation with the proposed elevator tower. Slide number 7, is that correct?
That is correct, Ryan. Yes. Mm-hmm.
All right. Can you just talk a little bit about the materials and frankly the visibility of the tower?
Certainly. So the size of the addition is roughly 7.5 feet by 8 feet, and it is located on the west side of the building. It will be comprised, the exterior finish will be a brick veneer, very similar to the existing brick we have located at a manufacturer that is able to reproduce the original brick there. And the rooftop there will be a hip roof that kind of aligns with the existing eaves there. And as suggested by the historic planning, we will be using a standing seam metal roof with a zinc color there. And that's, from the street line, there is a very good slope that goes down the westerly side there from the front to the back. So, and it's very heavily landscaped over there as well. So the visibility from the street is very little, as you can see in that photograph there. And that is the side elevation, looking at it from the side of the building there. It's located kind of towards the rear of the main structure there. That location was very carefully chosen to allow the elevator and the users of the elevator to access all 3 levels of the public spaces. Right inside there is on the first 2 levels, that's pretty much a study room for the students. They meet, they congregate, they hang out there, and they are also able to access the dining room from that level as well. And they also are able to go down to the basement, which also has another community room at the bottom where they congregate and hang out. So this location gives us really an ideal scenario for giving the occupants of the building fully accessible to all the public spaces. There is a third floor to the building, but it's mostly administration offices, so we did not extend the elevator up to that third floor.
And in that HIP detail is where some of the equipment for the elevator will be, I suppose, hidden or covered, and maybe one of the reasons why I know HPC went back and forth about whether you have a different roof design, but ultimately they thought that the HIP made the most sense to hide that equipment.
Correct. An elevator needs a certain amount of space overhead once it reaches the top floor, and so this HIP roof gives us that ability to have that space there.
And there was one comment that was, I think, read earlier from one of the advisory boards about perhaps mildew or water seepage in the bottom of the elevator tower. Have any comment or concern about that, just to maybe help put some of those concerns to rest about how they're sealed or walled off?
Indeed, yes. There will definitely be a waterproof membrane that will encase the foundation of this addition, as well as inside the foundation we'll have a sump pump pit that will have a sump pump that will pump out any water that happens to get in from underneath.
So the last slide I think I'll have for you guys, more views from the street and from the, I guess on the right, this is a view from the neighboring club. Is that correct? And I know that a good amount of scrutiny went into the design of this, but in your view, is it even visible from the street?
It would be very, very, very little visibility from the street. You'll have to really search for it, if that makes sense, through the tree lines and with the slope of the hill there.
I don't mean to be too brief with you, gentlemen, or diminish your role in designing this. But anything else you want to add before I open up to our either questions or for our next experts?
I think Zoom sounds
Board
pretty
members,
good.
any questions?
Thank you.
Any questions of the architects? Okay. All right, keep moving.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to bring up our civil site engineer. Sam, if you could introduce yourself.
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Samuel Wally. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey, and I've actually appeared before multiple boards before, not specifically the zoning board for Princeton, but I have appeared most recently before Holmdel, City of Summit, Union Township, Town of Clinton, and I have over 5 years of design experience in the state of New Jersey.
You are a licensed civil engineer?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We'll accept you as an expert in your field.
Thank you so much. So Sam, I'm gonna go back a few slides and maybe just again, we had extensive testimony of the neighborhood, but want to just orient the board to the project here with the area map, and then we can get into the proposed site plan.
Yeah, sure. So I know we kind of already touched on this throughout the night, so I'll try to be brief with this, try to run through a little bit quickly. So this is the aerial map that was actually submitted as part of the site plan package. The property, as everyone is aware, is located at 13 Prospect Avenue and identified as block 49.01, lot 2.01. Site is located in the E2 zone, and we currently have the property developed with an existing the Tower Club building, paved driveway that slopes downwards towards the actual building itself, sidewalks, and then the property itself is approximately 0.53 acres. However, the proposed disturbance for this project is very limited. It's limited to just 0.06 acres, or roughly just under 2,500 square feet. As noted previously, to the north, we have the Princeton University campus beyond Prospect Avenue. To the east, we have the Cannon Club. To the west is the Coffee Club and Washington Road beyond that. And to the south, we have the Terrace Club. So we know other questions on the site location. We can move on to the site plan rendering. So this exhibit is a partially rendered version of the submitted site plan with the proposed landscaping superimposed. As depicted, applicant is proposing to construct 4 parking spaces and an elevator. as justified extensively, looking for additional parking, primarily for the employees, and looking to bring the site into ADA compliance with the proposed site improvements. The building setback variance is also required for the proposed elevator, which is 4.6 feet from the property line, where 31.3 feet is required by code. Additional site improvements also include the patio walkway adjacent to the proposed elevator. If you're looking at the rendering itself, it's to the right-hand side. The proposed patio walkway is only 0.5 feet from the side property line and also requires a variance. As for access to the site, there are no proposed changes to the existing driveway width itself. So 16.7 feet wide will remain under proposed conditions, nor will the location of the actual driveway curb cut along Prospect Avenue change as well. The proposed driveway width requires a design waiver, as 24 feet is required, whereas only 22 feet is proposed. Moving on to the parking, which I think is the big thing for tonight. So currently under existing conditions, it's really just the stack parking, essentially just pulling directly in and then having to back directly out onto Prospect Avenue. So there's no actual designated spaces nor striped out spaces under existing conditions. As noted previously, we're looking to propose 4 parking spaces, which includes 1 ADA van accessible parking space. This parking actually is located within the front yard setback, therefore a variance relief is also required for the location of the parking. And as noted previously, we understand that municipalities' professionals' concerns regarding the removal of the sycamore tree in the front yard, and an alternative site layout has been considered to save the tree, while proposing, we're looking at potentially 3 parking spaces with a slightly extended asphalt loading area for the site's operations. The alternative layout will be depicted later on in testimony, but essentially it's going to be 1 ADA van accessible parking space, 1 municipal compliant, just ordinary space, 9 foot by 19 in dimension, and a compact car space, which would be 8 feet by 16 feet. As noted previously as well, we are looking to provide that EV charging station as well, which was requested by the municipality.
Sam, just to ask here, so here's kind of a bubble version of the original proposed site plan. I guess this line here is where that setback is. You're going to talk a little bit about why in the original design, the ADA space was closer to the street rather than closer to the building. Maybe just kind of explain what the original thinking for access was before we get to the revised thinking.
Absolutely. So the parking was originally laid out with the ADA parking space closest to the Prospect Avenue right of way. Reason for that being just the existing slope of the driveway itself was about 6 to 7 times beyond the maximum for ADA compliance. So we were trying to essentially keep the slope change to a minimum in that we keep the ADA parking space as close to the public sidewalk as possible, and basically have them route around the existing sidewalk along Prospect Avenue to basically tie back in and access the front door. That was the only accessible route in terms of providing the ADA compliant slopes and the closest point of access with accessibility for a wheelchair. So that was the original design intent in keeping the ADA space, and we're not really going to be changing the grades at that point or raising the site. That's really the only place we could have placed it.
So we took the comments that we got from HPC and the town's professionals and kind of rethought that a bit. And so what does this markup kind of show as possible?
Yeah, so we took the comments into close consideration. We took a look at other alternatives. For one thing, to save that sycamore tree in the front, and another to provide better means of access for ADA compliance. So what we took a look at for an alternative was essentially rather than having the site grade downward towards the building, essentially raising that to entire parking area and that trash enclosure area to essentially match the grade of the grass area, and all the proposed, all the existing landscaping, to essentially provide an ADA access point at the closest possible space to the building, and essentially just providing a curb cut rather than any sort of retaining walls or requiring any sort of excess cut. Essentially just looking to raise up the grades to tie into the existing grass areas, to allow for a softer slope, short accessible route, and just overall just a better design to make sure that tree within the front yard can be saved.
How would you
I think
handle your kitchen trash?
So to catch grade, the door on the left-hand side of this the slide here, you would essentially have to climb up, and additional steps would have to be provided in lieu of the existing sloped concrete under present day conditions. So with the raised grade of the parking lot, additional steps would have to be provided to catch up to the raised elevation of the parking area.
And that would also mean, and your kitchen is at the lower level?
The kitchen is about, I believe, 8 feet below the finished floor of the front entrance, yes.
So you'd have to carry the trash up.
That is correct, yes.
That's probably impractical. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay.
Excuse me, I'm just want to interject here. Our club manager is also our executive chef. I spoke to him about having 8 steps. Our trash be carried up, and we put it in garbage bags. We're not like a restaurant where we have these huge barrels of oil, so that would not be an issue. We called US Foods, our distributor, and we asked them, would that affect our deliveries? They said no, that a lot of their deliveries, they have to go up and downstairs. So that we checked to see if there's any practical impact on our operations. And the answer is no.
Okay.
And so Sam, this revised design, and we'll hear from our arborist in a bit, but it pulls both the pavement further away from the tree that we'd all like to save, that sycamore, and then also does not cut as deeply into whether it was the roots or just the earth, but essentially stays closer to grade, for allow you to move the accessible parking space closer to the building and then connect with a sidewalk, rather than having, the need to be closer to the street and therefore closer to the tree to end round for access. Does that essentially sum up
Yes,
the
that's
possible
correct.
changes?
Yeah, that's exactly correct.
Here, I guess it's a oblique overview that shows the kind of revised, reduced paved area that would be, and I believe your design shows pervious pavement, and one of the HPC recommendations was to have the match colors. Obviously, we would do that. And then here shows the current steep grade, which was one of the other reasons we were trying to avoid. You were trying to avoid having the accessible space so close to the building, because it would have been on a fairly steep slope. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Before we get to, maybe we'll just do summarize just again the we heard about from the architect, but the variances needed for the elevator tower. Those would involve building coverage and about 160 square foot increase in floor area. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
As well as an additional intrusion into the already existing side yard setback condition.
That is correct.
And in our scenario with the parking, I want to just briefly talk about the variances and waivers that are needed either, under either of these conditions. One being the narrower drive aisle. I'll ask you to explain that in a second. And then the parking in front of the setback line.
Right. So you want me to just jump in really fast for the
Please.
Okay. So both the old layout as well as the current sketched in layout both propose a 22-foot wide aisle, and that is non-compliant and will require a design waiver, as 24 feet is required for township code. As noted by I believe it was Mr. Weissman, it does actually provide improved circulation in that it does provide enough room at this point for a car to back out of a space and exit the site in a forward manner rather than having to back out into Prospect Avenue. As for the parking setback itself, with the proposed improvements, we are looking to provide a 16-foot long compact car parking space with alternative design, which would intrude on the front yard setback and which would also still require variance relief.
Now, those spaces, if someone would park there, wouldn't actually count as a space. They're smaller than the town's standard for spaces, but the likelihood might be usable. Is that essentially what you've shown there?
Yes, that's correct.
And
Which-
again, I think you
which
might have.
just- No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to ask again about the drive aisle with reduction from the 24 feet that's required for two ways, even though only parking is on one side. By reducing it to 22, you're able to pull further away from the tree, and in your opinion, there's still room to maneuver.
Yeah, there should still be sufficient room to clear to make a essentially a K-turn. We're basically backing out and exiting the site in a forward manner.
Thank you.
And in this scheme, you would have how many cars projecting beyond the front setback?
So there would just be a single compact parking space beyond the front setback.
Okay. And is this scheme, you've got two schemes here. You have the one that was previously presented to us and this. Which one do you favor and which one do you want to move forward under?
Well, I'll answer that. We obviously we love the larger parking situation, but we did take to heart the comments that we heard at HPC and from your professionals, so that we're perfectly comfortable with the reduced scenario that pulls away from the tree. Our goal is to meet the needs of the accessibility for this building and the small employee needs, but still save that tree. So that our motivation was to pull back both from grading and from physically from distance away from that tree as much as we could, while still getting that ADA space in a way that's accessible and still having some use for employees and deliveries.
Sure. So would you like us during this hearing to consider this scheme and not consider the other one at this point?
Yes.
Okay. So this is a scheme now that we're going to discuss and ultimately vote on.
Yes, unless there's gratuitously would like to do the more drastic one, but no, this is the one we'd like you to consider. The
Right.
compromise.
Okay.
scheme.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
So if there are other questions for our civil engineer, I'll just ask one more. There were some concerns about the existing stormwater condition with the slope towards the trash and towards the building. Would this scheme also provide more ability for you to handle stormwater on site and to alleviate any concern with water flowing down the existing driveway towards the building?
Yeah, it's actually a great question because in speaking to Mr. Yoon, I remember he did mention that there have been issues years prior with flooding, and this alternate design that you have pulled up right now with the reduced footprint that would essentially save that tree would be raised to avoid that existing driveway grading towards the that pump that's tucked away on the side yard. I don't know if you can see it if you zoom in or not, but it would alleviate a majority of the stormwater that would be flowing into that pump and would allow it to be redirected elsewhere. So it won't have as much stormwater flowing towards the existing building with this alternative layout.
And this is
And
also
you will
less.
have to build
Apologies,
Go ahead,
Mr. Chairman.
please, I'm sorry.
I was gonna say this also is less physical impervious coverage as well as less fill, so that you'd be able to have more room to essentially deal with stormwater underground.
You would have you could provide the additional storage from the pervious pavement. Yes.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, apologies, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I should apologize. Along that property line, you'll have to build a bigger retaining wall as you get closer to the building, I assume.
I think it might be the opposite. You'll be actually be, there's currently a cut that would be essentially filled in and reduction of retaining wall.
Okay. You're gonna have to bring, well, okay, but you're gonna have to do some retaining wall work there. And go back to the site plan for a moment. The hatched area is your handicap space maneuvering area, right?
That's
So
correct.
can you put your cursor on the closest point to the street where that compact car is, just so I think everybody understands where it'll be? Is it there? And that'll only yield 2 spaces. Is that correct?
The ADA accessible space would be the one directly below the striped diagonally hatched area where the cursor is right now.
Yeah.
And then one additional regular space here behind the line, and then the kind of smaller than acceptable but still
Okay.
usable compact space in front of the.
That's what I was getting to. So that compact space, show with your cursor the location of the edge of the compact space.
The edge of the
It's
compact
there,
space.
right?
Right.
Okay, it's right there. You were pointing further up before, so that's it. And then that compact space moving towards the tree, where would that compact space end? Right around that area?
Yeah, so right where the cursor is, the vertical movement of the cursor right now is where the top of the essentially car pulling in. That's where the front bumper would be.
So it's still going to impact the tree, but probably significantly less than before.
That's
Okay,
correct. I
thank
believe we
you.
have an arborist as
So
well
this is-
for
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this will be the one we'll consider then. Thank you.
Chairman Cohen,
Yes.
I just want to note that the compact space does require a variance because lots of less than 100 cars, they're limited to 15% of the total number of spaces, so it would exceed that, but just.
In compact spaces, you mean? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so it's still going to, yes, you're right. So we have a space, we'd still require a variance to park in the front yard and for that space to be a compact car.
Derek, is that variance still required if I don't say the space is gratuitous, but usually that comes up in the context of needing to fill a parking requirement. Here, we're not really looking to do that so much as we're having a space where one could potentially park. Certainly we would ask for the variance, but we're not trying to fill a parking requirement necessarily.
No, I understand. It's just, the ordinance speaks about a lot of less than 100 spaces. This is a lot of less than 100 spaces, and it limits them to 15%, and you exceed that. So I think it's a variance.
Understood.
Thanks.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Kennedy?
Okay.
A quick question. Are you still seeking then a waiver, design waiver from the stormwater management that the staff is recommending you make?
I'll let our engineers speak to that. I mean, we are going to provide stormwater to an extent here. It will be lesser so because we're removing some of the coverage. But Sam, if you want to speak to that and our ability to meet that with the revised design, which is different. One of the core reasons under I think the waiver request was the type of soil and that we were digging down into it. That's no longer the case now. So perhaps Sam, you could speak to that a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. We would have to do some geotechnical testing to confirm the permeability rates. But we can certainly work with the land use engineer to comply with any stormwater requirements or comments you guys might have.
Okay.
I think the answer is we're not asking the waiver anymore.
No more waiver. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. And Mr. Wally, just a quick question for you. You are employed by Dynamic Engineering. They are the project engineers, and you were the design engineer for the project. Would that be correct?
That is correct. I am the current design engineer. The one who actually initiated the project no longer works with Dynamic, so I am taking lead from this point on.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Sam may not have asked
Mr.
for that
Kennedy,
waiver up front.
Mr. Kennedy, just as the nature of the hearing now, it's 9:30, I believe, right now. How many more witnesses do you have?
Just one. We have our arborist to talk a little bit about the tree and why we have it set back at this point. I'd just like to have him speak, and that will wrap up our core testimony.
Okay, then we have board comments, we have public hearing, public comments, and then we go into executive session and more discussion. I just want to mention there's a good possibility we won't hear the last case this evening, and we may not get to the case before it. So, Derek, do you want to, should we mention to those in the audience that are maybe waiting to hear those other two?
I think you just did. I think
Yeah.
you're
Well,
correct.
I guess, Steve, the only question I'd say is you're saying maybe, so for the benefit of the people who are waiting, I think maybe the board would need to indicate now that they do not intend to if that's the case, that you don't intend to reach those two applications, because maybe
Well, I mean,
somebody to keep watching, thinking maybe you will hear the application.
okay, it gives us an hour really to finish this application, because we technically don't start any new applications after 10:30.
Well, it sounds like it
and
could
finish.
take an hour, so.
Well,
I'm
if I could
just
interject,
trying as a,
I happen to
Go ahead.
represent both of the other applicants, and our teams are. We're I know it is our cost and time to sit here, and we're happy to do it, even if it means we're not called. So I'll just throw that out there.
Okay.
That
okay, let's just keep going. I just wanted to bring it up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tim, if you're our batting cleanup for us here this evening, thank you for your patience and for joining us. If you could explain to the board what you do, your company, and what you've looked at here for our, even if it is, I've been saying sycamore tree all night. I know it's been referred to as a couple different things, but if you could just give your credentials first, and let's talk about our tree.
Yep, certainly. Thank you, Ryan. So my name is Tim Bruchet. I am the founder of Princeton Tree Care. I'm a licensed tree care operator and an ISA certified arborist, and I'm track certified. So we've had the honor of caring for trees in the municipalities of Princeton, West Windsor, and a few others. We work hand in hand with many of the parks of Princeton for tree preservation, as well as many other managed properties. We've been caring for the trees of the Tower Club for many years as well. And with the modified plan that you guys are now considering.
Actually, Tim, before you, I don't mean to cut you off, but just with that, Mr. Chairman, if I could have him accept it as an expert in as
Oh,
a tree.
I would think we could, yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. And Tim, sorry about that. Just got to
You're
get that on the record. So back at it to talk about what your thoughts on this tree of whatever type you're about to tell us it is.
Yeah, to clarify, you guys are right. It is an adaptation of a sycamore tree, more specifically, a London plane tree. Fortunately, London plane trees have a high degree of adaptability to environmental change, making them one of the most commonly planted street trees now in the country. What that means is there's a little more tolerance to change in their environment. With the modified site plan, we can confidently say that we can prepare the roots in a way and protect the root zones of the tree to accommodate for the modified site plan. There will not be a negative impact to the tree. So we're following ANSI A300 standards for pruning, and that includes root pruning. And with that, we have to maintain no more than 30% of root disturbance in any one instance. And we will be way underneath that 30% threshold of root disturbance. Combined with, making sure that the critical root zone and the drip line of the tree during the process of construction is surrounded by a protection barrier, which will not be breached during the construction process. With that, we can preserve the tree and match the current proposed expansion plan of the parking area.
Thank you, Tim. And this 8-foot number that we're showing here, that was your recommendation for pulling back from the trunk?
Correct.
And in addition to being further back, there's a positive effect of not, I guess, essentially trenching into the root system as was previously proposed?
Correct.
And there's a porous pavement proposed for the parking area. Is there anything about that or that could be changed about that would from a material perspective that you would recommend or that has been discussed?
Not necessary. Pavement is okay in this case. We can adequately prepare the roots of the tree. We can install a root protection barrier for the tree below grade, and you can continue on with the plan as presented without negatively impacting the roots further.
No. Good. Thank you.
Can I ask, excuse me, can I ask the shaded area, the red shaded area just below the, adjacent to the compact car, what is that?
Yeah.
So I'll ask Sam to come back here. The idea there was to have it be paved, but not necessarily a parking area, but to help with accessibility and when there needed to be some additional maneuverability for deliveries. Sam, you want to talk about what that area might be? It wouldn't be striped for parking, but would be.
That'd be exactly correct. Essentially, just the slightly expanded pavement area, just so we can improve maneuverability. We are a little bit closer to the access point, so we just wanted some additional space for maneuverability if a car has to back in and out an extra time, just to make sure that they have space to actually leave the site.
Okay, but it's going to be paved as the parking spaces will be paved. It's just not going to be striped or identified as a parking space.
Correct. It's essentially just open pavement at that point with pervious pavement rather.
Will be a parking space.
But it might appear to the inadvertent user that it is a parking space. So in the event of a pinch here, when you need, people pull in, that could end up being a parking space.
Absolutely. Actually, I mean, that's I don't know that we're not looking to hide that necessarily. Right now, the condition.
No, I know you're not, but I know you're not, but it is effectively, it's going from an appearance standpoint, it's going to appear as one entire paved area. Fine. Okay.
And on that same subject, because I was wondering the same thing, none of the non-accessible spaces in your original plan needed that maneuverable space. So the question is, do you really need it, and can we do without it and return it to grass?
I think the answer to that would be that our original plan had 3 usable full-size spaces, and we're attempting to reduce the pavement and pull it away from the tree and still have use of as much of this little parking lot as possible. Obviously, the one that would be striped as a actual compact spot would be primarily used that way. The other one likely would as well, and it's our attempt to have a micro subcontract spot for a very small car, if that and a reduction of the full size of the previously proposed space.
So you're going to have 2 full-size cars, a compact, and then you're going to consider this a space for a smaller car?
Well, I don't think it's allowed to be considered a space, but in all likelihood, a small car could fit there.
So so it's basically 4 cars.
Yeah,
Right.
now we're back to
Again.
4 cars. That's,
Yeah, I agree with Michael. I don't understand how you'd even use that as a maneuvering area for somebody in the driveway. It would just be another place to park. But okay, if that's what you want to propose, that's what we'll propose. But it will all be paved as if it's 4 cars of varying sizes.
Correct.
Okay.
whoa.
Go ahead.
So we have other questions for our arborist. We'd happy to have him speak now, but that's his testimony on the tree.
Okay, very good testimony. Okay, so what would be, is that the end of your presentation?
It is subject to a summary after public comment or prior to deliberation. That's our testimony. We feel that again, bifurcating the 2 pieces of this project, the accessible tower and the parking area, one is tough, as HPC kept turning over with, and one perhaps not so tough in the stair tower. Further splitting up the parking area as revised, we feel that the revised design hits that important goal of protecting the tree, and that is our intention, to make sure that happens. That's a feature of the club and this space that is important to us. And beyond that, our goal is to make sure that there is a functional ADA space here and some space available for the employees and deliveries. We understand that's a sliding scale. We feel that we have a design that gets that for us. I recognize that I think that there's a bell curve there of what the board might find acceptable and necessary. Like anything else, there's no other place for parking here. I hope that was cleared up between the loss of the spaces that the applicant was renting and the kind of odd arrangement that the university has with the eating clubs. It's just not possible to get other nearby spaces, and these are used by the most needy of the workers here with the most difficult hours. We'd like to accommodate as many of them as we can, frankly. If we could figure out more, we would. This location is unique to this particular club in that no one else is confronted with the lack of a through running driveway or rear access for parking and deliveries. And also unique in that it is extremely sheltered from the street. There is a large brick wall, which is an important feature of this building, that screens what's happening here largely from the street. So it's not, no harm, no foul behind that wall. We're not suggesting that, but it does mitigate almost completely what happens there. And we'd like to try to accommodate as much as we can for deliveries and these employees, as I hope you heard was appropriate while pulling back and saving that tree. So thank you.
At this point, before we go in to open it up to the public, because I stopped or at least limited the discussion of parking, do any of the board members have any questions of any of the witnesses before we go into open it to the public? Okay.
Chairman?
Hearing none.
Chairman?
Yes, Donna. Yes.
I just wanted to get a little more information
Donna.
from how the trash will be accessed with the revised design. There's quite a grade drop, and I would like to hear a little bit
Right.
about that. And I would like to see if our landscape consultant, Mr. Dobromirski, could give his opinion on the revised parking plan about the impact on the tree. So,
And I have one question too that may be answered by, this is in this discussion of the trash, which I think is a very important item. Will there be a dumpster at this higher level now that will be served to contain the trash till it's picked up, or how is that going to be dealt with?
So I'll let,
okay.
I'll direct initially to Sam. That there would be, and I think it would be appropriate to have either a subcommittee or historic, if we were to go to this route, take a look at an appropriate revised enclosure for that space. But Sam, you could talk a little bit about the trash area and then access to the kitchen.
Sure. So the two actually, I guess, kind of go hand in hand because it is accessed through the same door. But essentially what we're looking to do is this alternative layout. We would be providing steps coming up from that kitchen area up to the trash enclosure. And essentially that's just so we can catch grade to the elevation of the raised parking area to essentially eliminate the wall on the original layout to provide just a simple curb, since we would be matching the grade of the adjacent grass area. As for the trash enclosure itself, we certainly would need to have it enclosed just to have it properly screened. And we're absolutely willing to work with the municipal professionals just to come to an agreement as to the appropriate material or facade to have that screened away from the public.
doesn't the grade have
And
to
also
be
make-
increased where the trash enclosure is? I mean, I don't see topos on the plan, so it's hard to tell.
Yeah, so that the trash enclosure would raise alongside with the remainder of the parking lot. So that's the intent with keeping the entire parking area at the same level grade, and the trash enclosure would be at level with the raised parking lot.
So it'd be about 6 feet above grade, based on your observation?
In relation to the current grade, yes, it would be more or less at grade with the finished floor of the building now. That trash enclosure is actually situated a little bit lower than the front entrance of the building, so it would essentially be raised to more or less the same elevation of the front entrance, the front door.
You don't have
And
any
that would-
idea what that would look like, do you?
We did not prepare an elevation.
I mean, right now you drive by and it's kind of down in that little recessed area and it's not that visible, so.
Yeah, you're right, it's gonna be very visible at this point, but that can be dealt with architecturally. Is that going to impact the maneuvering space from any of the parking spaces?
No, it would not. This is actually why we decided, another reason is to provide the striped off accessible route along to the space closest to the building. So it would allow
Sure.
maneuverability to provide enough space and clearance for a car to back out towards the trash enclosure. Otherwise, if you're basically talking about parking away in along the actual corner of the curb line, you're maneuverability is drastically decreased. So we took that into account as well, and we took a look at essentially providing the accessible striped off area at the corner. So we do have enough space to basically back in and out, and maneuverability should not be impacted.
Jim, do you want to speak? I see you're moving your hands. Jim?
I'm okay. No, I'm okay.
Okay. All right. Derek, I think you're right. I mean, that is a big issue, the visibility of that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Are there any, I think Donna, you had a question?
Yeah, I'm wondering if someone can just take me through, show me a site plan and take me through when someone gets out of their ADA vehicle in the wheelchair or whatever, the situation merits, and just show me a pathway of how that person is then going to navigate to your elevator, to your proposed elevator.
So, Sam, I'll, because I got the cursor, I'll do this maybe twice, and you can tell me if I'm wrong here. But this is our original scenario, that because the existing grade was kind of steep, had the ADA space close to the front sidewalk, that user would
Okay, but
walk.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I want to know for the plan that you're putting forth now.
Yeah.
Okay.
The plan that you want us to vote on.
So that space is here. They would connect through a sidewalk to the front door and enter the building like any other user.
Okay, so there's the sidewalk is level, the front door has some kind of a ramp.
Correct.
Right? Yes, that's correct. Yeah, there's we would be eliminating the wall at that point, and it would be at grade, so it would be within compliant slopes and relatively flat. So there should be no issues with ADA compliance and accessibility with wheelchairs.
And that person's not going to have a problem with the grade issue that exists down there.
No. No issues.
The revised plan eliminates what may have been, and this was a considerable discussion at HPC, and why I was going to show the original plan again, having the ADA space originally with the design was closer to the street to avoid that pitch, because if it were to be closer to the building, there was a several foot crevice essentially that was kind of dug into the ground to match the existing grade.
Right, and with the original design, you're essentially, as you're approaching the building, you're actually going lower and lower at a much steeper rate. So the original design intent was to keep it as close to the right of way as possible, but one of the negatives for the accessible route for that was you're essentially redirecting any accessible routes back into the right of way to wrap all the way back around along the Prospect Avenue sidewalk, and only then can you work your way up to the on-site portion of the sidewalk.
Okay, so now a person could get out of their car and navigate through that area that you've got in red without having a problem with the grade.
Correct, because it's going to be raised to be closer.
You're going to raise the grade.
Because it'll be closer to the finished floor, correct.
Okay, is there some type of standard you have to, is there an ADA standard with the grade that you have to meet?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's minimum slope requirements, maximum slope requirements. So we would make sure we're compliant with everything, just make sure that we have all the appropriate landings, code compliant ramps, everything of that sort.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Leave this slide for 1 second. I just have a question.
Apologies.
That's all right. Just go back to it. The tree. Oops.
Am I showing the right screen? Sorry, let me try again.
No. All right. I just want your original site plan.
This one.
Yeah, this one's, but the tree is shown here. The small circle in the center is the trunk. And then on your other site plan, you show a very large tree to the right of this. There is a tree there. Is
That
that
very
right? 'Cause
large-
your other site plan, well, go back to your original, the first site plan. Yeah, that
This is
tree
a-
is,
so-
there's the trunk of the sycamore or the London plane tree.
That
And
tree
then
we're
there's
actually
this
pointing to
very
right
large
now.
tree.
Yeah, that tree we're actually pointing to right now with the plus sign shown as a trunk. That's actually a proposed
Yes.
tree, so it's not currently there. That was intended to be
Okay.
planted as a replacement for removing, which
Okay.
at this point would have to be relocated or may
Yeah,
not be
that's
removed
fine.
at all. So yeah.
Okay, so that would just be part of this whole discussion with the municipality, with the engineers and our landscaping consultant to decide how to handle that whole area.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yep.
Board members, any other questions?
Steve, I just wanted to see if we could get Dan Dobromilsky to weigh in on the revised plan.
Sure, I'd like to hear about it. Yes, Dan, would you please?
I think Justin had a question. I'm not sure.
Yes, yes. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. You might have already covered this, but so that whole area in red that you just showed would now be at the same grade?
Correct.
So there's a pedestrian path to the east of that slopes down. How will that new grade, relate to that? Is it right now there's a low wall there and some bushes? Is that, are we now looking at kind of a sheer wall there?
I'm sorry, I'm not following. So you're saying there's an additional accessible path to the east, or is that?
If you look to the
left of the
here,
dumpster.
it's not really shown at scale, but you see where the two lines form a path over to the left. There's a pedestrian path that goes down to Ivy Lane, and it slopes down. So I guess my question is, if that whole area is raised at a significant slope, and maybe I can get some engineering help here, but how does that then relate to that path?
Well, first, can I just chime in? The path is off-site, and that was my comment regarding a retaining wall along that side. So even though obviously raising the lower level might minimize a retaining wall, this area, raising it up may necessitate some retaining wall work. But in theory, it would have to be totally independent of that path, because the path does it belong to the adjacent club, or is that a university piece that goes all the way back to Ivy Lane? Excuse me.
That's the adjacent club. And actually, one of the, a way to, it's an alternative way to get to the rear of the property, actually.
Well, that's not the one that goes all the way down to Ivy Lane and past the back of the Jewish Center.
Yeah.
Which there must be some sort of public access easement if it is on private land.
Or it just could be owned by the university or one of the clubs, and they allow people to use it. But the bottom line is it's off-site from this applicant's standpoint.
If I could just
He's worried about the visual impact of the trash enclosure when it's raised up on that walking
Yeah.
path that connects the Ivy Lane to Prospect.
Yeah, well,
That's
and
very
not
true,
just,
because there's no, yeah. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
not just the visual impact, but if there's now a, let's say a 6-foot high wall, for lack of a better word, I think that's something the board should consider.
if I
That
could just
was,
chime
like I
in.
said, went back to my, go ahead,
Sorry.
please. No, go ahead.
The survey provided with the plans indicate that there is an existing wall there. So that grade of that walkway, that existing wall on that side, on the eastern side of that property line, there is a grade difference. But I think you're right, Mr. Chair, that there will have to be some work depending on what changes to the grading there are proposed with this. The topographic survey provided shows about a 4.5 foot grade difference between the sidewalk within the public right of way and the concrete landing where the current trash enclosure is. So there is a wall on that side. It's not a sloped grade. It's not, without knowing what the grade changes are to this area, it's hard to say what work will have to be done, but there's definitely going to have to be some kind of retaining wall work done to consider whatever modifications are proposed.
I think you're right, and I'm still comfortable allowing our engineer and landscape architect, the municipal engineers and consultants to resolve this with you. I mean, subject to what the other board members think. But I think, you're right. It needs some work. It needs some study now that you're changing schemes. All right, and Derek, you would obviously have an opportunity to see that whole thing as it evolves, so you can be comfortable with it.
I just was curious because the walls are limited to 6 feet in height, and to screen without seeing the grade and stuff, we'll just have to see what happens. They might need another variance I don't know, but.
Right. Okay. Derek, do you have any other questions?
No, I just keeping Dan on the warm up there for Dan Dobromilski.
Okay.
You want me to chime in now?
Yes, please.
So Dan Dobromilski again. So I share the concerns for the grade on that side by the Ivy Lane walk. Again, not knowing the grades, but if you have to reconstruct a retaining wall there, how do you do that right on the property line without disturbing what's on the other side of that property is not an easy task in itself. So that
it's going to be tricky. It's going to be tricky.
Yes. So that and there are showing some vegetation there. I did not look at what that is. I don't know what it is, but obviously without permission to disturb that area, you'd have to cantilever a wall or something. I don't know, but that's an issue that would have to be worked out for sure.
Yeah, definitely. You would need permission to work on that property. It's too close not to.
Right. So that was a concern which I think everybody's addressed. With the existing tree, I appreciate the effort they've made to try and save the London plane tree. I think the effort, what they did might allow for the preservation of the tree. And the reason I say might is you really don't know where the main roots of that tree are, or the majority of the roots of that tree really are. There's no way to really know. So what they've done is it is still putting the tree at risk, in my opinion. I heard root pruning and root barrier, but all those things, the root barrier it would protect the pavement. The root pruning is something you should be doing no matter what, whenever you excavate tree roots, and the pruning of the tree relative to the pruning of the roots or the disturbance of the roots absolutely makes sense. I think things that you would have to add to that would be starting with using compressed air for excavation to try and figure out where the roots are so that you minimize the cutting of the roots. And that's technology that's been around for a while, and that would be the preferred method of initiating the excavation in order to figure out how to minimize the damage to the root system. I think if you were to ask me to look at that and suggest what would be necessary to save the tree, I would say you would have to eliminate the compact stall and the solid red de facto stall, which in order to feel comfortable that you had a chance to save that tree long term. I think the idea of pervious pavement means that they are building some type of box of pavement that'll be deeper than the normal depth. And therefore there will be excavation beyond just a few inches in order to build that. And that means that you're going to be cutting roots pretty significantly. And so I think doing what they've proposed with the red design, for lack of a better way, the proposed design, may allow it, there's still a risk. If you really wanted to try and further reduce that risk, you would eliminate the de facto and the compact stall, and you'd be left with 2 parking stalls. And quite honestly, the access aisle and the ADA, you know, people are going to park in that when there isn't an accessible person. So you'd have 3 spots that people park plus the driveway, is what would, from a practical point of view, that's what would be occurring on the lot. To me, that might be a better scenario to actually save the tree. So that's my input at this point.
Thank you for that. Very good input. Okay, if there are no other comments, then we'll open this again. Mr. Kennedy, do you want to say anything before I open it to the public?
Could I just have a follow-up question to that testimony?
Certainly. Yes.
Are you saying that any change right now jeopardizes the tree, or would I be right in thinking that if the tower and the handicap parking were all that happened, that the tree would be relatively unscathed?
I think constructing the accessible stall and the access aisle as shown on the modified plan would have very minimal impact on it. As you add parking and get closer to the tree, you increase the potential risk that you're going to do significant damage to the root system and potentially lead to the demise of the tree. The testimony that London plane tree is one of the more adaptable and tolerant trees is absolutely accurate, and that factors in to that analysis. But my experience tells me that if you get within 10 feet of a tree that big, you run a high risk of losing that tree. And typically it'll take about 5 years for the tree to fail. And so it'll look like, oh, we saved it. And then 4 or 5 years from now, it'll start declining and fail. And so the rule of thumb, we're not even in the rules of thumb. And quite honestly, if this tree was, the Mount Vernon tree, we wouldn't be anywhere near it because you run that risk. This tree, but if you, from a practical point of view, we try and stay at least 10 or 12 feet away from a big tree like this, and if to even have a chance of saving it. So 8 feet is right on the margin of that dimension. And so anything we can do to pull it further away would be better. If you eliminate what I'm calling the de facto stall, you're still 8 feet away, but it's only from a narrow spot. So I think that's better. If you eliminate the compact stall, you pick up another probably 6 or 7 feet. So now we're at 15 feet, and I'd feel much more comfortable with that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, just
Yes, go
prior
ahead.
to
Sure.
going to public, if I could just add, in prepping for this, we certainly on the next process steps heard the same things from our expert that Mr. Dobromirsky just talked about. The using air to kind of blow the roots out to identify, prior to excavation what is appropriate. And just to throw out there, if the removal of an entire space, doesn't necessarily have to be a binary yes or no, and that perhaps a process where that could happen, the actual boots on the ground exploration of those roots, and that if it can be done safely, that the space either that you're suggesting be removed entirely could become compact or shrunken and become subcompact. It is a function of a radius from a center point that would be identified during field work. And since I think our expert is saying similar things, that if the board were to be inclined to remove completely, and as perhaps at least considering allowing that to be determined in the field and only go up to the line that is determined that is safe for the tree, if that meant instead of losing a full space to have it become a compact space, for example, or so I just want to put that out there because I think our arborists are in agreement that that would be what the process is, and that perhaps we don't need to determine immediately what size that space is if you're inclined to allow part of it.
Okay, that was good. It was a little detailed here, but are you basically saying that we're going to leave it up to the professionals during the process of construction, if this were to be approved?
I'm saying I would prefer that to the board saying cutting it back. I'm going to say arbitrarily, but without knowing. Obviously, the testimony was that the further away from the tree, the better the tree is gonna fare. And if the board was inclined to allow as much of this mini parking lot to be there that is determined to be safe, we'd prefer that to be determined and implemented, rather than just saying no now.
Okay, it went from 4 cars to 3 cars, and then when we got into a discussion, we got another partial car, basically. So we're back to, as Michael said, we're back to 4 cars again. So then ultimately, it's for the board to decide how many cars we will allow there. And then the professionals then during the process of construction would make a final determination. If we allow that to happen, they can make a final determination of what that configuration would be, whether it's 3 cars or possibly even that 4th mini space, or whatever. Is that right? Is that pretty much the direction you're going in?
It is, Mr. Chairman, and I think that would be preferable to taking the knife and cutting them all out now, and that might preserve the tree.
I agree. I agree with you, because I think that as Mr. Dolomilski said, and the tree expert for the applicant, this whole thing, it needs more study before a decision can be made. All right. So if there are no other questions,
Chairman Combs, sorry, one more point that Dan Weissman.
I was close. Okay.
Sorry, I hate to bring it up, but if
no problem.
The trash enclosure is considered an accessory structure, and there might be a variance for moving that to another location. So I don't know if that requires a 5-foot setback based on the size of an average dumpster. So I mean, it is where it is now. It's probably going to move a little bit, right? I mean, it's hard to tell. I don't know.
It sort of seems like it might, yeah. So right now it exists down in that area, in the lower area. And so any movement would require a variance if it's within that 5 feet.
Right.
Does that include vertical movement? My understanding was that we really keep it in the same space as it relates to the sides and setbacks, but it would move vertically.
I mean, if it stays in the same footprint, I think it's okay. Yep.
I have one question, and that is,
please, George, yeah.
Yeah, what possibility is there of the availability of carpooling or public transportation to really limit this to maybe 2 parking spaces? That's my question.
Mr. Chair, if you like, I can have Patrick kind of re-summarize that. Ultimately, I think the testimony was that it's all those efforts are being maxed out currently. That there's no particular magic wand or new process that we could do to make the situation necessarily better. That there's significant carpooling being done now, and some of the in-town workers do use public transportation. Patrick, do you want to quickly summarize that again? If there are other avenues, we'd certainly like to take them, but I think the workers and staff are doing as much as they can to carpool and utilize the existing public transportation options. Patrick, do I have that close?
Is he going to comment?
I believe he's in the attendees somehow and needs to be moved over.
Claudia, can you let him back in, please?
Good eye, Justin. He is there with his hand up.
Okay.
Hi, sorry about that. I got kicked out and I came back. So basically, again, we're talking about our employees who make $12 to $15 an hour. I don't think we can retain them if we say, hey, hop on a bus in Trenton, hope to get here on time. It's just not, I don't think it's feasible. Possibly, but our point is to try to make their lives as easy as possible. So is it possible? Well, anything's possible, but realistically, I don't think we can really ask them to do that.
Some discussion in the background there.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Michael.
since Mr. Young is back, I might as well ask a question I had in my mind, but regarding Tower Club not being able to pay your testimony, pay for parking, it would throw the operating budget into a negative. I want to make sure many operating budgets, a line item is for reserves for unanticipated costs. One, does your budget, annual budget, monthly budget, take into consideration for an item like that?
Yes,
Therefore,
we do, but we're talking about over 100-year-old building. So we have a line item called funded reserve, and we usually put $30,000. And that item, especially over COVID, we've gone over that. Now, whenever we go over our budgets, we call the alumni and we say, hey, can you give us some more money? Unfortunately, before COVID, we ran about 15 years at a surplus. Since COVID, we've run the last 5 years at a negative. And this year we're going to lose about $450,000. So again, we have to go to our alumni and ask them for some money. So again, since we are the only club that won't have that parking, for us to pay, try to pay, we're at a competitive disadvantage to the other clubs if we pay our people. And so again, this is a real problem for us, since again, our only source of income is the students, and the students are wildly unpredictable. Like I said, we had 15 years where we had a positive, and now we've had 5 years at a negative. So who knows? I mean, across the street, I don't know if you've seen in the articles, but the club participation rate has historically been about 70%. I think it's around 65% right now. So, and it's been that way for the last 3 years. So we're trying to figure out what exactly the reason is, but I'm not sure. But really, we don't have, I'm not saying we're going to go under if we pay for the parking, but it's really, it's a burden to us, since we're walking a thin line, and I'm losing already so much money, and I'm trying not to fire anybody, to lay anybody off.
And just a follow-up question, I do follow, you say your line item is for about 30,000 a year. And of course that's needed for repair, replacements, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes you really, you don't have to use it all. Sometimes you do.
Yes.
Do you, is the R&R or the reserve account possibly overfunded right now? on the cumulative?
No. Oh, on a cumulative over the years? Well,
Yeah, how much do you have in the R&R account?
right now, nothing. But nothing, but we do
Okay.
move money over to a foundation on positive years. So if you go back many years, like how much money we have in the bank, we have about 600. Since we're in the middle of an operating year, it's hard to tell, but we have about 600,000 in a separate account. But that's it. That's our end all be all. And so a shortfall, like I said, shortfall is over 400,000 plus. That's going to eat up 2/3 of our savings. And then we have to go to the well again and say to the alumni, hey, it's an emergency. We need some money. So that's the situation that all the clubs are in. Usually 1 or 2 clubs a year are on really financially shaky ground. Luckily, we haven't been. But if things continue the way they are, we could be within the next year or two if we continue to take these losses.
Let me make sure I understand and my other board members understand, which is said. Are you saying at times when you build up a surplus, you move the money into the foundation?
Yeah, we generally move the money over from our operating account.
And
if we have a surplus.
And at
which
present,
we have in the last several years, but previously we had.
And at present, you have a sort of your backup fund, 600,000?
Approximately.
Okay, I want to make sure I understood that. Okay.
That's so just so you know, the funding for this project will all come from, will not come from the club, will come from alumni.
Okay. Yeah, I thought about asking who's paying for the elevator, but I don't really care. I just wonder what reserves you have that could help out the employees if you had any. And you've clarified.
Yeah, we do. Like if it came down, if our employees came to us and said, we can't do this, then we would have to have a board meeting and decide whether we're just going to cut back operations or if we're going to pay. The problem is then we're at a competitive disadvantage to the other 12 clubs.
And just to add to this, just to make sure everyone's perfectly clear, while we've had some testimony about the financial impact on some of these possible elements of a solution on the club as a nonprofit, the argument from us is not that there's a perfect solution and we cannot pay for that. It's not a financial hardship. This is about where the parking should be and what is needed for the employees. It also happens to be that it's financially difficult and perhaps not sustainable to do some of the things that were suggested. But I just want to be clear that this is not a choice between a perfect solution that we just can't pay for. It is a traditional hardship application about the location of parking for the business rather than just us saying that we're cash poor, so we need the cheaper solution. I just want to be clear about that.
Yeah, I think I disagree with what you just said. I think the testimony was we can't afford to pay for the parking. It will throw us into a deficit. That's what was said.
Patrick, could you that was a component of a lot of testimony about how parking on the street didn't work
why
functionally.
I asked the follow-up.
So
I
we
wanted to
are
make sure
nonprofit.
you didn't have money.
We're in a nonprofit, okay, and we have to operate at a break even. We show too many years of profitability, quote profitability, we get in trouble with the IRS, right?
Yes.
You understand that, right?
I understand.
We run our club based on break even with $30,000 set aside every year. If we have to pay for parking, so that's about 8%. We did the rough calculation, 8%. Our salary costs, which are the highest cost of any operation, that will bring us into negative. We're already in the negative, but it brings us more into it. So that's what we're saying.
And Patrick, if I could just ask a follow-up, even if those financial feasibility items were not issues, just assuming that they were not, is there adequate on-street parking available regardless of who's available?
No, so it's good to say in theory, oh, they can park in the garage on Nassau Street. They can walk here and they can walk there. But these people are lower paid employees. They don't have that luxury and they probably don't want to do it. And I'm sure that they're sick and tired of carpooling everywhere and trying to match schedules. So in theory, it's well and good to talk about, but in practicality, we're talking about people who don't really have the means to do these types of things. But they don't want to. I can tell you right now, they don't want to do it.
They don't want to park right in front of the Tower Club.
No, they don't want to go to a
two
parking
or
garage in the
three
middle
of them. No, 2 or 3 of them.
Well, listen, I can
would
bring
love to
in
do
all
that.
my employees and we can sit there and ask them. I'm willing to do that.
Yeah. They wouldn't even have to do the
us to
fire
sit here and
drill of moving their cars. The ones that come at 5
they
o'clock.
don't like it. They don't like doing it.
Okay, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Okay. Yes, who's speaking?
Justin.
Oh, okay, please.
Thank you. So just a question about this new design, or newer one that we're seeing tonight, for the applicant. Will the brick wall, to the, between the driveway and the neighbor, will that be affected, by this new retaining wall? Basically, is it going to be demoed?
Sam, are you able to answer that? My
Yeah, so
understanding
we
is that it
haven't,
would.
yeah, so we were actually just looking at this preliminarily with a sketch. We haven't prepared a formal grading analysis or grading plans just yet, but we would anticipate most likely a knee wall, probably between like 2 to 3 feet, with our side being on like the high side.
Okay, so the reason I ask, I know you went to the HPC and asked for demolition approval for other things, but I don't believe you asked for that. So I think you'd end up back at the HPC if you were to go through with this.
Sorry, which wall would you expect to be demolished?
It would be
adjacent to the driveway.
Yeah, the walls that basically run down both sides of the driveway. On the right hand side, it's going to end up going into the site, facing the Tower Club. The right hand side would be raised, so there wouldn't be a wall there at that point. It would essentially just be a curb line that would wrap around the parking area and provide accessible means of access to the front door of the building. And on the left hand side, that wall would essentially be filled. So we would anticipate probably a 2 to 3 foot, give or take, knee wall, with our site being on the high side in relation to the adjacent building next door. And I think that would be for the Cannon Club, if I'm not mistaken. We haven't prepared a formal grading analysis just yet, but that was just preliminarily looking at some of the spot grades out there.
Sam, maybe I just clarify a little bit. So we're looking down the mouth of the driveway here. On the right is an existing retaining wall. This was approved by HPC and would have been removed in the existing scenario that we had proposed, because this would have been augured out with a new parking area. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And do you anticipate any of this wall that we're looking at on the left to be removed?
Yes, so that wall would essentially end up being, it'd essentially just be raised at that point. It would be
Raised
filled.
like RAZ or raised like made higher? Unfortunately, Princeton's HPC has a requirement where, you know, demolitions are specifically approved. That's the way I'm looking at this. I don't know why that this wall on the left would be removed. It might be built higher, but I don't know that it would be removed.
It would be built higher, yeah.
Okay, I just want to be clear because HPC has some fun requirements about demolition, and I'm just as we're parsing out this, I'm seeing the retaining wall on the right was already approved to be removed because it was going to be pushed back and with replaced by a new retaining wall further into the yard when there was going to be depressed parking. And to the left, it looks like that this wall may be extended back, but not removed. Is that fair, Sam?
Yeah, that's correct. So essentially, we're just going to be raising it up to tie into the elevated parking area.
Okay, so just to be clear, when it comes to conditions of approval, if we get to that, that wall will remain as it is, not be removed, and anything would be built above it or away from it?
I don't think we know yet.
We'll obviously pull in a geotechnical engineer who can actually do a formal analysis, just to make sure that it's all
Okay.
structurally sound.
Okay.
And obviously, if we did,
return to the HPC for demolition approval.
Yeah, if
If-
there is any demolition, we will have to return to the HPC, understood.
Mhm.
Okay. So, are we at a point at which we can open this to the public, or is there any further discussion? I don't object to further discussion, don't get me wrong.
May we just take 5 before we open up to the public?
I think that would be fine. So it is in fact,
Thank you.
10:30, no more applications tonight, but it's 10:30, so let's take a 5-minute break and we'll reconvene at 10:35.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, my 5-minute bathroom break.
Jim, how are you?
I'm well. How are
To
you?
the
Thank
board,
you.
Very good. You're in
Yeah.
town these days? You're not out on some exotic vacation?
No, I am in town. I was just saying, it just seemed odd that for some reason, the third week of the month is, especially during the summer, I happen to be gone. So I don't know, but nowhere exotic in the near future.
Good. Well, it's good to see you anyhow.
Yeah, it's good to see you too. I ran into Michael downtown a week or so ago, which is great. But one of these days, we're all going to be all in one room together at some point. I don't know when that's going to be, but
that would be nice. Okay, it is 10:35. So let's see. We should be back on. Do we have all our board members here? Waiting for George, waiting for Donna.
Yep, Donna, and if we could take
and
jurisdiction of the other two cases, perhaps.
Okay. All right, do you want to do that, Karen?
All right.
Should I
well,
read
the-
into the,
Yeah, the
should I read
next,
into
the
the
next
record?
case,
Case?
sure.
Okay, the next case would have been Z 23-392, 24 Randall, block 7403, lot 12 in the R5 zone. Karen, is all the paperwork in order?
Yes, the noticing is in order.
Okay, so we can take jurisdiction of that?
You can, in order to avoid the applicant having to renotice, you'd need to announce a specific date tonight for hearing it.
Well, I think it's probably, I think it's gonna get moved. Derek, do you think to our next meeting? What do we have coming up? Because we're not gonna finish this one tonight, in my opinion. You're muted, Derek.
Yeah, Derek, you're muted.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, October 25th. I apologize.
Okay,
October 25th, okay. All right.
so for the benefit of anybody watching tonight, it's being carried to hearing on October 25th. You will not receive any further noticing from the applicant.
Okay, and our next case would have been case Z 23-362, 28 Edge Hill, block 36.01, lot 12 in the R1 zone. Is that R1, Edge Hill? Yeah, it is.
It is.
Okay. Karen, is everything in order?
Yes, the
All the
noticing is in
paperwork,
order.
notices?
Yep.
Okay. Derek, when would you like to slate this one for?
Derek, you
Sorry, I
muted.
apologize. The next available meeting, October 27th or
25th.
25th, excuse me.
Okay.
Over 25th.
So same announcement, anybody who's interested in this application, it'll now be heard on October 25th, and you will not be receiving any additional noticing from the applicant.
Okay, good. So we're back on the record for our first application, 18 Prospect. We'll continue now. So if there are no more questions from the board to the applicant or the applicant's consultants, I'm waiting for somebody to say something. Okay, if they're not, then I'm going to open this up to the public for the public portion of the hearing. Karen, excuse me. Claudia, has anybody raised their hands indicating they'd like to speak on behalf of this application? Claudia?
I'm checking. I got Jessica on the line. Jessica,
Okay.
but I think she's not here for that application.
Okay, then.
I am
Oh.
here for this application now that
Okay.
I've sat through it for 3 hours. I'd like to make a comment.
Ms. Vieira, can we see you? Can you make yourself
You
visible?
certainly can.
Great.
Hi there. How is everyone?
Good.
We're
If you
all
could give us,
well.
do you feel comfortable giving us your address, Mrs.
I
Vieira?
certainly do. I live at 86 Stockton, here in Princeton.
All righty. And we're going to swear you in.
Sure.
If you swear or affirm any testimony you give this evening will be truthful.
I do, of course.
Thank you.
Just very quickly, I'd like to thank everyone for their time in this, reviewing this application. I've learned a lot just sitting here researching it, and I look forward to walking by the location tomorrow. I think that my biggest concern as a resident here in town is the parking anywhere in the front yard. And where I can appreciate that the building is not ADA compliant, I would hope and I look forward to seeing a revised application that details all of the changes, because I don't know how anyone can cover or come to a conclusion based on what has been discussed. And so I just, again, want to thank you all for your patience. I know everything myself is ready to be done, but I really look forward to hearing more information and more detail about how everything would happen and how it would all come together, because I'm not clear on it. Thanks again.
Thank you for your comment. Okay, Claudia, is there anyone else who'd like to speak?
I see no hands.
Okay, we'll give it a second or two. Okay, we will close the public portion of the hearing. Again, Mr. Kennedy, you have the opportunity to say something before we go into executive session.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, want to thank everyone for both here tonight, everyone at HPC and the other reviewers that went into this. There's a balance that we are all trying to achieve between the functionality of a unique historic building in an area where unfortunately it's the only building saddled with this lack of access, and the constraints both visually, which I think we hope you'll agree are minor because of the way this site is laid out, and the realities of needing to accommodate employees and deliveries, and it is a sliding scale, and it is one where this board has always been reasonable, and everything I've heard tonight shows that careful balance that we always see between taking efforts to save this sycamore tree, to pull the parking back as much as we can, and I trust, as you always do, that you'll put us in a place that gets some fair amount of the items that this club needs in their unique situation, noting that this is not a precedent-setting situation. They are the only club that does not have access on this street to other parking or the rear of their property. Again, while these applications always need to stand on their own and aren't necessarily precedent setting, this one is particularly not so, because of the unique situation of this club. And as you're considering this, I hope you see an applicant that's been waiting a while to sitting through and working with all your constituent boards. And frankly, this is the first time we've had to really vet all these things together. It is unique because of the I guess, penalty of the stair tower brings us to this board. It's not one where we could do concepts. This is our chance to get your feedback here. And I think, I hope you'll see from us being here with revised designs that we've taken prior advice to heart and will continue to do so. This is a club that has real needs and a unique piece of property with a historic site. We had a really good and we think positive conversation with HPC on these issues that we think resulted in ideas towards a better plan. And I hope this is not, from the applicant, is not a take it or leave it situation. This is one where we are looking to see what is the proper place on this bell curve of the reality of the needs of this unique property, the historic nature and the types of policy reasons that the Princeton has with discouraging parking in certain areas, and whether that is going to lead to other people trying to do that on the street. I think it won't, because no one else is in this situation. Also, no one else is screened like this property is. But be all of those things as it may, we are happy to continue to work with you, your boards, and your professionals towards the right balance that fits the needs of this property, the needs of this community, and frankly, the historic nature of this building. We thought we got very close there with HBC. It was a similarly difficult back and forth. I know the chair is still here. It was a long discussion about this, and I think we landed at a pretty good place where the acknowledgement that some of this front parking makes sense. Now, exactly how much, exactly how far from the tree, exactly how screened it would be, we hope that you see the movement we've made as an indication of our willingness to come up with the right plan. And if it's an approval tonight, subject to an administrative process, if it is your feedback and wanting to see a revised plan, obviously I'd love to see this approved, but what we want is to get it right. And this is our first chance and only chance to really hear what you're thinking in reaction to the comments that our attempt to address the comments that we've received. Far and away, those comments are that tree is important, and we want to make good on that, and we feel have. The next comments are ones that there's been a lot of differing views on. Exactly how much and what type of parking fits here. We think our revised plan makes more sense for an ADA accessible space and person with a better way to get to the front door versus the depressed plan, which needed to be closer to the street. But we want to know what works best and are willing to continue to work till we get it right. So I want to thank you all for your time tonight, and I hope that extends back to HPC and your other review commissions that got us these comments that brought us here. So thank you.
Mr. Kennedy,
Thank you.
I was planning on asking you to recap the variances that you believe your client needs at this point. But since it appears that some of the revised plan would need a little more investigation, I think your engineer said maybe geotechnical analysis. I'm not sure if you can do that. And I'm not sure what the board's thought is tonight. If they would like to see the revised plans.
Well,
but a recap of the variances you need, I think either staff needs to do that, or you or your professionals would need to go through again to say these are the variances
Sure.
we're looking for.
And we can start with I'll say the simple ones.
Right.
And when I say simple, though, it is technically a floor area variance, but we will, that is unchanged in any scenario from the recommendation from HPC. So that is the, all right. I have too many memos here. I was supposed to do 3 applications. I have them strewn across my desk here in anticipation I'd be switching to a different one. So with apologies, let me just pull up, and I'll be reading from Mr. Bridger's memo, but the floor area variance, the side yard setback variance, and the building coverage variances, all related to the elevator tower, are unchanged by anything we've spoken about today, and unchanged by anything that came out of HPC or the other comments. So that's a 30% required max for building coverage. We're existing 30.43 going to 30.68. Building setback variance, 25 feet required. We're going from, I believe, 10.5 feet to 4.6 feet. Projection into that side yard for the patio, while there's an existing condition there, that side will ultimately be 6 inches, plus or minus for that variance. The other variance really is kind of the binary one, parking within the front yard. We still talked about that. That is a yes or no, essentially. We have what the setbacks are. We are proposing under both scenarios, parking in front of that parking line. We also have the waiver for the aisle width. 24 feet is normal. We've proposed 22 feet so we can pull further away from the tree. Sam, I'm asking if there's anything that I've missed in recapping these, but I believe going through Derek's memo, all of the C variances remain the same as noticed and essentially as indicated. The D variance does as well. It's really just the front yard setback for parking would be revised if that's pulled back, and it would always be a lesser number than was proposed.
And you no longer need the stormwater
Waiver, I suppose. Yeah,
waiver.
yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And your argument is that not that it's a financial hardship, but that yes, you're considering this a C1 because of the lack of parking on site and the age of the building.
Correct. The unique features of this site, the inability to have access through any other way or place parking upon it, and that C1 hardship perspective. Similarly, the testimony was that as to the ADA accessibility portion of it, that is we talked about the positive and negatives. The positives will be slightly different from the ADA accessibility part of the space versus the other parts, but you did hear, maybe not have been fully accepted universally, but the testimony about the need and benefits from having on-site availability for some of the workers.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so at this point, we'll go into executive session and the board can discuss this, ask questions of the applicant. But if you don't mind, I'd like to start off and basically say, I think there have been so many changes discussed over the evening from the original plan submitted, and all these require a great deal of thought from the applicant, as well as a great deal of review by our professionals and staff members. And quite frankly, I think the board, in my opinion, should have an opportunity to look at this again so we can continue the discussion, because there are a lot of moving parts here and a lot of things yet to be decided. So my opinion is that we ask for revised drawings to come in that everybody can review, and then we discuss those. That's just my opinion. So, board members, comments, please.
Yes, thank you. It's a great idea.
I concur. I totally concur. It's trying to follow the ins and outs tonight have been, there's a lot of stuff moving around, and I'd like to get on site again. I was there before, and I'd like to go back again with the new plans and really be able to suss out how it all fits together.
I think there was a lot of great discussion tonight, and I think the plan is evolving into one I think that will really work, but it's just too many things happening right now. So,
can we take the two apart though and approve the elevator?
Right now, that would be up to the attorney or be up to the applicant to decide if they want to bifurcate the application.
So, well, certainly if the inclination is to approve the variances associated with the tower, separately. And if we can do that, and I'm looking at Karen, I think perhaps we can. I don't know that it's going to be any particular construction savings. We are on. This is unusual for the zoning board, but it is also, I guess, a site plan approval as well. And I don't know that we can split them up and fully. If we can, we'll certainly take it. I think it would behoove, even in the 5 minutes that we have, to hear the thoughts on that. I don't mean to be cavalier about it, but I think that is the simpler part.
I'll withdraw that suggestion, because I have something else I want to say that as far as I'm concerned is more important. And that is that I would never approve this additional parking in the front yard without a real honest to God study. I live on Prospect. I go by these properties multiple times a day. And the idea that you're going to add 2 or 3 possible places make a difference on your employee parking is just ludicrous, because people who park in those places are generally students, and they park at various times, and they fill up every possible available spot. And you're going to add 2 or 3 spots plus the 6 that are going to be parked in the driveway. And I'm not for a big parking lot in the front yard of that street. It just doesn't fit. So coming back next again with new drawings isn't going to change my mind on that, unless you could absolutely prove to me that employees are going to be parking in those spots and there isn't going to be anybody else parking in the driveway. And I can't possibly understand how 2 more spots is going to make a difference to your employees. And it just doesn't make any sense to me at all. I mean, I think you have a legitimate need for parking, but I think using the argument that your employees driving from Trenton are the ones who are going to benefit from it. Where are they parking now, for instance? You say the first person in parks there, but what about the other 12? I've never known of any cars that held 12 people or 8 people or anything like that. So, and again, all you have to do is drive up and down that street during the day, and you can see what those parking lots look like. And it's not an orderly. Every piece of available spot will be filled with a car at one point or another. So, I'm not prepared to vote for a new parking lot in front of that building.
Well, keep in mind, Stephen, that a major part of this was providing handicap parking. Not specifically for the extra space theoretically for employees, but they wanted to try to bring this thing closer into compliance with current ADA standards.
So add 1 spot.
Yeah, I'd like to.
So
may I?
George, go ahead.
I'd like to agree with Steve on the need for parking. I mean, just a personal point of personal privilege. When I was commuting to New York, I would walk 10, 15 minutes to the office from Penn Station. What's wrong with people walking half a mile? I mean, you don't have to park where you work. And so I don't see the need, and I see a lot of downsides, but I do agree with the handicap parking, 1 slot.
But if it's left up to the eating club to enforce that parking spot, it's going to be filled by some student who parks there and runs in and eats lunch and runs back out again, or eats dinner. And
we have, again,
I know we have no control over that, but it's just, to me, it's the whole aura of this idea that we have to provide handicap and we have to provide parking for our employees. It's just students park in those spots. Well, do a study, Brian. Do a bona fide study. And
message received. The shaking was just on the students. They students walk. It's there's no students parking on this spot, and they wouldn't be, but point received about justifying it, and understood.
Michael, did you have something?
Michael, you're muted.
You're muted.
Yeah.
I have a question for Derek and Karen, just for clarity. If there was an approval of some scenario of parking in some degree in the front yard setback, would it cover just the spaces in the application in the front yard setback, whether that be 1 or 2 or whatever, or would it also be granting permission for the stack parking in the driveway aisle? Would it be legitimizing that too?
That's not what's
Can't
been
see how you
requested.
can
I
do
mean, I
that.
think it would just be the parking that they're requesting now. I mean, it's the age-old question about parking in the front yard.
Yeah.
Comes up a lot on residential applications. You can't park in the setback, but everybody parks in the setback,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
there's 50 feet beyond the car they could park, but they're lazy or whatever. So they're asking for what they're asking for. I look at the driveway as a driveway. You needed to get in there and access those cars to get your deliveries and your garbage. Will people park there? I think we heard testimony tonight that they probably will,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a hard thing to enforce, but technically it's not permitted.
But that does mean that there are gonna be 8 or 10 cars in that parking lot, not 2 or 3 or 4.
More comments? Any other comments? Well, I guess let's try to summarize. We're not going to vote on this evening. Is that the consensus of people on the board?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Do we want to require a revised plan to be distributed to the town, our professionals, and the public? Do we want this new plan to be studied and the applicant to come back with a fully developed scheme? I would say yes. I mean, whether it's 100% every detail taken care of, I don't know if that's necessary, but I think there needs to be enough thought given to the new plan and how the number of spaces to, again, the compact and subcompact cars, all the comments that we had this evening. And I think that needs to come together in a plan that gets distributed to everyone. Any discussion of that?
If there could be a document where everything was presented, we would have a large overall picture of this. And also the member of the public who made that same observation that she was confused, the public would also understand the application.
I think, yeah, you're right. I think we need to at least get some unified plan developed by the applicant that says, in light of all the comments, this is what we want to do.
Exactly.
If in the, I know you're over, Mr. Chair, but if it's possible as we're developing this, if there is a feeling one way or the other on the whether it's a positive development for us to have raised up and put the ADA spaces closer to the building, closer to grade versus the original plan, if that is a positive direction in some of your minds, I think that would be helpful for us to know as developing the plan.
I mean, I can only speak for myself. I like the idea. I think from a practical standpoint, dragging trash up from the basement to that first level is going to be a pain in the neck. my opinion. In the good weather, it's relatively easy, well, easier. In the bad weather, it's difficult. But that's an operational thing, and that's your decision. But
No, that is helpful.
I like the idea of. Okay. Board members? Okay, well, what is the direction that we want to give the applicant tonight? Do we want to say to the applicant, come back with a revised plan and submit that plan to Mr. Bridger, who'll distribute it? The staff will review it, and then we'll base our next hearing on that plan? Or do we want to move forward with the information we have and just come back next month and discuss it some more? I, for one, would like to see a plan.
I would too, indicating what is requested and, the exact variances and or waivers and what's being proposed, labeled, so that we can understand it and the public can understand it.
Yeah.
I think we should all take a look at the property again and take a look at what it means to have a third of it covered as a parking lot.
Yeah.
Yep, you're right.
Oh, no, I think I think we're all going to go back out there and look again.
Yeah.
Michael,
I
your
hope-
thoughts?
I hope that,
go
Mr.
ahead,
Kennedy, I
please.
hope that we've been clear about what differences we are looking for. And I'm not even sure exactly. I mean, I don't know if it's kosher for us to be in touch in between. If you say, wait a minute, we're not quite sure what changes you are talking. I don't know if that's okay to do.
I wish it were.
No,
Yeah.
it's not. No.
We can
Well,
converse
it's
with
not-
staff and perhaps they've retained a good amount and they're always excellent at helping guide us.
Okay.
Yes. I think you should go through the staff then if you have any questions, but
Yeah.
I think we've given you a lot of input tonight, not necessarily everything you need, but
yeah.
I think
Any
also, at least I heard, and I spoke after the chairman did, questioning that red area, that turnaround area that eventually in our conversation said, oh yeah, that'll be probably used for a fourth space. So I think a few of us were a little bit surprised because Mr. Hanson said there were going to be 3 spaces, one of which would be compact. I wrote it down. But all of a sudden we're back to 4 spaces. And before it was at 4, it was, no, that's just the turnaround area. Maybe someone heard some objection to moving back to 4 spaces and basically an alternative design that took up almost as much space as the original design.
and still compromises the tree.
And still possibly compromises the tree. There wasn't a lot, said about the tree part it was, but also that extra space, I thought that morphed into that turnaround space that morphed into a 4th space, almost seemed like a bait and switch.
Well,
If
I
we're
don't know
all
if it was
looking for
intentional.
it, if people are looking, well, as I say, Mr. Hanson said 3 spaces, one of which is compact.
No, that's our architect. I don't think he testified on that, but I understand what you're saying. That's not the
Well,
intention.
I didn't write it down out of my own head. I wrote it down because he said it.
Probably you mean the engineer, I suppose. But in any event, we hear what you're saying. Was not intended to. The message is intended to be, we'd like to save this tree, so we'll make the parking lot smaller. being realistic about what the needs of this place are. I'm hearing that, I think we're all hearing that the story for the need of this was not, received particularly well. And while the ADA spaces seem mostly receptive in the justification, that the other ones both need more justification, and I'm hearing you want to see less of. I mean, that's pretty. I think that for the most part is pretty clear in the feedback and helpful.
Yeah. I just wish that the alternative design saw less of it. Truly, because the other commissions also said, well, we'd like to see, two of them at least. We'd like to see less.
I think though that the focus of all the other comments was on here's things we think will help save the tree, rather than 4 versus 3 spaces. At least that's how we received it. So I'm hearing something different from you tonight on the number of spaces, but our goal and what we were trying to achieve was to move away from the tree. And if we could somehow scrap together some usable space for the function of the club, that's what we would do. But your comments are what we're here to get. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I'm also saying though, what I was trying to say was a couple of the reports from a couple of the other commissions said, yeah, we understand the handicapped and could they do less? I mean, it's in there. So it's not a new sort of theme.
Yeah, we're coming to that same conclusion.
Right.
All right, so
when will it be carried to then? Do we know?
Well, Derek, do you want to? Well, it depends. That's really up to the applicant. If they're going to prepare additional drawings for our review, then they've got to be done in enough time to be reviewed. I don't know how it could happen October 25th. Derek?
Derek, you're muted.
Sorry, excuse me. The rest of the year is problematic with the cases due to the Thanksgiving, League of Municipalities, and Christmas. So we have November 8th or December 13th at this point.
But we don't, if the applicant is willing to renotice, we don't have to set a date now. But if they prefer not to renotice, then I'm afraid we do have to announce the date.
We also need an extension of time.
Right.
Thank you, buddy.
This expires tonight.
Okay. Is that
About,
a problem?
45 minutes.
That was our whole plan to sneak that through.
Keep that clock going.
Get it under the wire. Well, the thing is, the thing about the renoticing, the plan has changed significantly. So the renoticing is going to discuss that. So I think it's probably makes sense to renotice.
So right now we don't have a firm date. It's just being carried.
Right.
And the applicant.
Mr. Kennedy, how do you feel about that?
Obviously, I think our engineers can turn this around pretty quickly. It's not a heavy lift to renotice though, so that's I don't mean to quibble about that. It's not a there's essentially one neighbor.
I don't know.
To this.
You're right.
So.
No, it's more of evaluating the plan and you discussing it and possibly discussing it with the town professionals before you come in with a plan that you're comfortable with.
Yeah, I just hope. I know everyone's busy with master plan stuff, so I think we'll be able to turn it around. Sometimes picking a date does kind of, you move things along. We'll get our stuff together, and I know that your professionals will help us, and we won't be waiting months to be back before you this board.
I think you ought to break it into 2 parts. Frankly.
Yeah.
Okay, are there any other comments from anyone? Okay, well,
When was it extended to?
it
Perhaps,
wasn't, there's no date.
perhaps since
Yeah, we don't
the-
have a date for carrying it, but.
But I
this
need
is-
an extension.
So that
I
since
know
the
you do,
October
so-
and November are so close, can we just do mid-November? That gives us at least 2 meetings before we'd have to give you another consent. Or to the, at least to the, through the, right, the December meeting is early in the month as well. I mean,